the previous public session from our meeting 30th of June. Does anyone have any comments to make on the minutes? No. Then if we can note and adopt those minutes. And then if we move to matters arising, are there any matters arising from the minutes that are not on the agenda? Action items. Jim, if you can just run us through action item, I think.
Yeah. Yep, so that's the letter went back to the students as was drafted and you signed off, and we just need at some point to then go back and consider what to do next. So if you remember, there was a paper that was done around that previously, so we need to come back and consider that again.
So when do we anticipate that coming back to the board?
Next month?
Well, okay, come next month.
Yeah, that's probably easiest. Yeah, gives us time to discuss.
Can I just ask what content of the letter was? Or it just goes to
We would have put it on the agenda if we got it out in time, but unfortunately we didn't. But we could circulate it now if you like.
I can email it to you.
Or read it of the result.
We're also wanting to make sure that the students got it before it was public.
Are you going to do that?
Yeah, I think so. Are you doing it, Kim?
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up so that I can tell you
When did they get sent out?
Last week, about Thursday.
Monday.
Oh, it's Monday.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 8 days ago.
No, it was yesterday.
Yesterday, by the time it was signed.
Oh, was it sent by snail mail?
I emailed it through to medicine and to Ethos.
Just one. Okay, so letter Z. Sorry, I'm just pulling it up so I actually provide you with the correct information. We warmly acknowledge their attendance at our board meeting, and in terms of presentation, we recognise the work they've undertaken and congratulated them on following through on the issues that they felt strongly about. We clarified a couple of points with them. One is the prior review of services delivered by the GP and schools contract. And what we did was made sure that they understood that that wasn't conflated, that while they occurred on a similar time frame, one wasn't the result of the other, so we separated that out. And also clarified the funding and that the child and youth cover is not service funding, but it's capital funding. So that in terms of the petition, we advised them of our decisions that at this point we would not continue the service base. They were asking us to continue. And in terms of their second request, we did advise them we remain committed to working together on a co-defined approach for the next 6 months. So that's the basic.
See,
well, no, because we've got another paper to come back that we were going to consider in June. It was drafted for June, and then we will have the ongoing co-design to do. We don't have any correspondence in the public section, so Jim, I'll pass it to you. One page 12, our performance dashboard.
Thanks, Kim. I'll just point out a few things that I think are in there that might be of interest. there is the figures there around immunisation, which show that effect. Those are 3 month figures, so they show the effect there. But I am pleased to see that with the gearing back up of services, people getting back into practices again, and the outreach and immunisation service, that those numbers have lifted again, well over the 80% mark for the 1 month figures. So we're encouraged around that, and we'll expect to see that to continue to improve.
Sorry, what are you talking about?
The immunisation at the start, the first.
Yeah, but were you saying it's over 80 at the 1 month figure?
I'm saying that those are 3 month figures. Those are 3 month averages. So you're getting the effect of what was happening in lockdown. So I'm saying that we are seeing a rebound of that now that we've come out. So you're not seeing it in that figure because that covers a 3 month period. But the 1 month figure is, when you just look at over 1 month, the rate has improved significantly. The enrolments in general practice, newborn enrolments in general practice, that's specifically a topic that we're working with on the 2 PHOs, and we've got a meeting with them this afternoon about that. We also expect the rate of smoking advice for people within primary care to pick up again now that they've moved through and those services are returning to a more normal service operation. The numbers, you'll see that the numbers of people attending the emergency department has jumped up again, and but not to, we'll see a bit later on, but not up to the same levels that it had been before. Those figures on computed tomography and magnetic resonance imaging further down are incorrect, and are coming out of reporting back from the Ministry of Health, and we have to correct that for them. They are very close to the target levels for that. We're not sure why they're getting those low rates, but we've spent a lot of effort trying to make sure that what our figures are correct, and we believe they are to be correct. The acute readmission rates, not sure why those are just above targets at the moment. That is unusual for us. Or so that is that's been a bit higher. So we need to find out what has happened there. Ambulatory sensitive hospitalisations have dropped a little bit, and I expect that we'll see for the under 0 to 4s, but are up for the 45 to 64s. So we will need to be looking, and that's another topic for this afternoon's discussion with the PHOs on that.
Excuse me, can we go back to the referral of obese children? And I noticed that's percentage. Do we have any idea of numbers? And is this looking at the process rather than what's happening with them afterwards? So a couple of questions. Do we have any idea of numbers? Are they double figures, single figures?
That is for be-forceful checks, so that's when they're checked. There's roughly over a year, there's about 700 children that would turn 5 in a year. So divide that by 12 would give you the numbers of kids per month, and 70% of those would be Maori. So I can't do the maths in my head, but that would give you a fair idea of how many are being checked by month a year. Yeah. So yeah, that would be about that.
And what do we do with that afterwards? Is it just to get them into the system to acknowledge that number of children?
So those kids are in the system. So
Yeah.
that this is
And what happens with them afterwards?
So when at their before school check, if they're considered overweight or obese, the process is then to engage with the partner and refer them into programs. So at the moment there are the primary responses for sport. And there's a whole lot of stuff around supporting a response to both Māori and that too.
Thank you.
Are those 3 months figures as well, Jim? Is that a monthly figure?
That is a monthly figure. Would you like would the raw figures be more useful there than just the percentage?
I know, just that if we realise, like you talked about, the immunisation rate was actually a 3 month average, and that's obesity child reference is a 1 month figure. It's just a bit confusing because this document doesn't discern between.
Yeah. Most of the figures are 1 month figures, but 1 month figures, but the immunisation one is a 3 month average.
Those two diagnostic waiting times that are so MRI and CT figures. Who generates the dashboard that we've got such inaccurate figures in what's now Onboarding?
Well, we've utilised the figures that come back. The Ministry of Health gets some reporting regionally, and we're not sure how they get their figures, but clearly they're wrong. And that problem seems to have occurred over the last couple of months, so we're not sure what they've changed to get those figures. So that's what we need to find out, why they are getting the wrong figures and get our correct figures in there.
So we'll have that,
because they look quite alarming.
Yeah, well, do you think we'll have an answer by next month?
Yes.
Cool.
Just noting on the second page under acute coronary syndrome, Jerry Devlin's coming along to talk today about some stats that we've got there and other things cardiology related. And just to note that we're over the target in that month, 75%, but not the previous month. So that would be one of the points to discuss about there. Yep, that's probably about the highlights or lowlights as they turned out to be.
Does anyone have any questions on the performance dashboard? Okay. Thank you, Jim. We will move into 6.2 Chair's report. So before we go into this, Kia ora. No way. So this is from Hauora Tairāwhiti to you, and this is informal recognition of your period of time as an appointed board member on Hauora Tairāwhiti. And I know that we're late doing this because you have continued to be with us, but I thought actually we do need to formally recognise that period of time. And also for myself and the rest of the board, did really want to say that we are so pleased that you're still part of our board decision-making processes in your capacity as chair of our Māori advisory group, and still bringing all of your knowledge and experience and expertise to the fore. So, nā mātou tēnei,
Kia ora.
Mātou.
You bunch of snakes. Well, I'll be on well, I'm a little bit taken aback, but thank you so much. It feels like been around like a decades, I don't know. But it is still thrilling to be part of the kaupapa. I have to say that seeing the advances that have been made throughout the Māori health is, particularly in this Tairāwhiti district, linked in through Te Manawataki, it's been just amazing to see the transformation from the old into the new vision. So this is quite, yeah, I must admit I'm a little bit taken aback, but thank you also very, very much. My apologies for lateness this morning. Wasn't the drive, I was trying to find a car park. I thought about parking on the grass. Oh, no, Jim might get me towed.
Don't worry, because Jim left the tow.
Organise that while you're all sitting quiet.
Jim's towing service.
Kia ora nā.
Start a used car yard somewhere.
It'll be a way of helping with the deficit to either solve to defray expenses or
and board fitness at the same time as we chase again.
Anyway, so that was the first thing I wanted to do. Can't the second thing is really covered in Jim's report, but I did just want to take a moment to reflect on our year end, which I thought, does really merit some particular comment. Firstly, our financial sustainability. So I was really, really delighted to see that we have come in under budget. So at a lesser deficit than what was agreed. So our agreed deficit was $12 million. And on a business as usual basis, we've come in with 10.67. Jim will have to tidy these things up if I get a bit wrong, but we've come in at 10.67 million, so that's a really good result. Of course, we have had some costs that take that out a bit, but on a business as usual basis, we've come in less. So we had around $1.4 million of COVID costs that we haven't received funding for, that we have to bear. And we've also made additional provision for Holidays Act. But when you take out those extraordinary items on the planned basis, our financial result is really good. So ngā mihi kia koutou. But then alongside that, we've also done really well, for example, in our planned care. I'm really pleased that for the month of June, we're back up at the level of production that we had always planned to be at. And we do have a plan to catch up. Aim is by the end of the calendar year, Jim.
For the delays caused by COVID.
Yeah, for the COVID delays. So that is moving along. And then on top of that, you've all seen our capital projects are geared up and racing ahead. And all of this in the middle of probably the biggest health thing that any of us will ever experience in our lives. So I did just want to, make mention of that at this stage of our agenda. And just pay special thanks to our staff who have just kept on going through all of this. So ngā mihi kia koutou. Come on, computer. Then just a couple of other things. So Manautaki met early in the month, and that was the principal things that we talked around there were the regional equity plan, which those of you who made comments, they got contributed in, and I believe that went off to the ministry in the middle of July. And then we also talked about across the wider region, our 2020 funding envelopes and how we're going to get to break-even budgets. Across the region, pretty much everyone is saying actually this is going to take 2 years to get to break-even budgets. This is tough to do in 1 year. So those processes are still underway and under negotiation with the ministry. Gavin and myself attended a meeting with Te Rūnanga o Ngāti Porou and Ngāti Porou Hauora. I think I'll talk about the substance of that later on this afternoon, but suffice to say it was a really good and positive meeting, and we've got work to do together. Some of you would have been part of the Rautapura Order Conference and Taumata Conference just last week. So I spoke at the Rautapura Order Conference as part of the panel that was talking about the response. And it was really, in many ways, a community celebration of what we did. But I think the main message that I wanted to try and convey is I talked about testing. And fortunately, the Ministry of Health had just updated on the Monday the by DHB testing numbers. And so as of Monday last week, we still remained the DHB that tests the highest percentage of its population and the highest percentage of its native population. Notwithstanding that, most of the testing is now happening at the borders and in quarantine facilities. We have still got the highest rate of testing. But the message that I wanted to give was that that's great and it's provided assurance over that period. But what really matters is the testing in the last 14 days. That's all of that over the last few months is now history. And what figures that matter are the assurance in any given incubation period. So I'm pleased with what we've done, and I'm continue to be pleased that across our primary care and in our pink zone here at the hospital, we have got mechanisms in place to ensure that testing is available within our community, and that those who are presenting with symptoms are sent on their way to get tested. So it's really those last 14 days that now matter the most, I think, to me and to any of us. And just the last thing is the Minister continues to be really well engaged with DHB chairs. So we're meeting with him weekly via Zoom. Next week we have an in-person meeting. And fair to say that the big issues that he continues to push with us are flowing through from the previous Minister, and they are financial sustainability and equity. So those remain very important in his in the things that he's asking of chairs. So that's me for this. Unless anyone's got any questions or things they want to raise.
Actually, just on the testing front, it's maybe not a forum here, but it struck me the other day when I was watching the logs being loaded in the port there. Is there interaction between crews and our land-based staff? And because I have seen groups of who I assume were crew going to Perfusion and loading up the stuff. And what's our?
We have formal interaction with the Port of Gisborne and working actively with how they will be supporting. Most of the crews are staying on, but when they are coming off, they have to be within a contained environment. And so the Port of Gisborne is actually setting up spaces for them to come off ships. Those ship members should not be loose in the city. So whomever you were saying will be agents of the ships that are coming in. So they're quite tight border controls that we are tasked with managing. The owners of the ships all have expectations about what is expected when they're coming into port. And our team is really closely with the Port of Gisborne.
Have we done blanket COVID testing of the staff there or off Gisborne?
No, that's
The
not.
staff on the ships.
No, the staff on the ground. C3 and
The border.
yeah, stevedores and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're part of the border program. I don't know if they've all been tested, but they're definitely part of the monitoring program about border people. Yeah, so the same as the people working the border in Auckland or wherever else. It's the same concepts required around that.
Okay, so arguably that's probably the most likely point of it was to Tairāwhiti from a border perspective.
But our surveillance testing will, as Jim said, be consistent with the national surveillance testing for
So ships are inspected when they arrive. It also depends on how long they've been at sea prior to being here, where they've been prior to being here as well. So there's a whole checklist of what to do. So our staff, our DHB staff are the people that conduct that checking and comparison with the requirements.
Our public health staff have received direction from the centre and they're delivering on all of those expectations.
Great.
Good question.
Because you're quite right.
Good
It is a point of possible introduction to the country, let alone here in Tairāwhiti.
Well, if we haven't offered a block test just to the port staff, stevedores, I'd like us to.
Well, we have to work within the national directions. So
We've done targeted block testing in our testing regime in the last 3 months, haven't we? We've done some really targeted stuff.
That was because we were testing asymptomatic people, though.
So our MIH team, or our team led by the MIH, have been looking at which groups of people would we be targeting testing towards, and that's certainly one of the groups alongside of larger human interface with communities, so our supermarkets and things like that, that they can only move forward when they receive support from the centre that that's an appropriate activity.
Yeah.
I'll take that question. So I can come back with an answer.
Thank you.
okay, we'll move to item 6.3 now. Our report on Te Hauora and Tairāwhiti.
Sure. Anyway, tēnā tātou. There may be some of you here who don't know me. I don't know why that would be the case. By way of introduction, my mother's from Tukumaro Bay and my father's from Muriwai, and throughout down through to all my wahine. I schooled here as a child and was born in Gore, of all places.
Wow. In Gore.
In Gore. Notice the R?
Yes.
And schooled there for many years as well. I came back home with my wife in Hastings because mum and dad moved back to Tukumara Bay. And as the little youngest son, you want to kind of stay close to mum. That's the closest I could get back to here. Been involved with Hauora Tairāwhiti for quite a while now, and absolutely privileged to be the chair of the Maori Relationship Board, T1, Te Waioro Onboarding. Again, they've thrown me into that seat, so I'm very privileged indeed. At our last meeting, one of the things we've been trying to do is grow youth, getting them interested in what the governance looks like, particularly for Māori governance and in the health sector. So we've just brought Tairāwhiti Cheffi as a member, but we've elevated her to the deputy chair role. That's all right with her employer. And, what I'm hoping to do is she actually drastically reduces our average age in the so she's on a winner already, actually. So we want to grow more youth throughout the system, and that was one way we thought we might be able to do that, particularly as she's in the system, so to speak. So she already has a base knowledge of those things that affect Māori, particularly in Tairāwhiti Māori health. Hoping to introduce her to Te Manaotaki, again, just to broaden her horizons, but bring a more youthful approach to health and innovation and those sorts of things. We had our last recent meeting. Actually, this is my first meeting here, I think, in person. So it is, isn't it? Yeah. Gosh, it's been great at home. Anyway, we are hoping to introduce it more to Te Manaotaki as a sort of pass the baton on, hopefully get her enthused in that area. It's just going to take a little bit slow because it's a big machine to think about. For Te Waioro Nukutai Memeha, probably the biggest thing we want to take a lead from here, but certainly want to be involved with that, is the Simpson report. It's got some connotations, we think, for Māori health. We'd like to see how we can put pegs in the ground so they don't shift with the various areas in that report, which, I'm not going to say they're threatening, but the indications of them are quite deafening to with the resounding changes that they're forecasting. I think, and you can quote me on this, Winsley, I think it's not the government of the next election that's going to make the biggest impact. It's going to be who the coalition partner will be. And that will, I think, sway hopefully where we can move equally in terms of the Simpson rule, particularly with Y2575. That's got to be a big game changer for all people, but particularly for access of Māori to health services. So those are the sorts of things we'll be concentrating on with T1. We also, at our last meeting at Te Atawhai, the Rainbow Connection for our people, and very interesting, very, very interesting concepts with the Te Atawhai. We think that non-access or reduced access or difficulty is the preserve only of Māori, but there are other interest groups which also suffer the same sorts of things. So as a broadening aspect to equity, we think that's probably something we can also awhi with in terms of our kaupapa going forward. I think that's broadly speaking where we're at in terms of people. Right? Looking at Josh, I just wanted to also make note of the invitation to provide a name for iwi te rangi was graciously received and actually was responded to immediately. The name took on the proviso that our resident Pakeke, well-respected Pakeke Tāne Ngāriwi, was give it some blessing, and we understand that's occurred. So we're very grateful to be part of that mechanism as well. So more to come later on.
Does anyone have any points to raise with Nga on anything?
Kapai. Think.
Hang
is on her way. She was doing a kohanga drop off. Her baby just started kohanga this morning.
Oh,
Wow.
okay. Okay. She's okay. I remember those first days. Okay, Jim, if we can pass to you for items, Chief Executive's report.
Thank you very much. I won't spend too much time on that first section of my report there, just at the, as a review of the end of the year. I usually make a few comments about what has happened and then at the end set the scene. So in that one I started off with how I'd set the scene last year, and then of course went on to say, well, nobody was ever going to know at that point what was going to hit us as a community and as a country and as a world and the intervening time. So thank you, Kim, for acknowledging and highlighting the efforts of everyone and when you were talking previously, and I totally endorse that. As I say, there has been humbling to see firsthand just what people can achieve in a crisis. And that is, sometimes now when I think back, at the moment, because we have returned in many ways to what we consider to be normal, the crisis seems to have receded in our minds, but at the time it was, as I put there, was intense and an anxious time for all of us. So good to have moved on to there. And I think when I sort of started to think about it, actually, given that period of time, we actually still went on to achieve quite a lot of what we had hoped to achieve at that time. Not everything, but it does give it, and that does give us plenty to get on with in the time coming up. But certainly accomplished a lot in that period of time. So again, that took a lot of work from people from the board right through, and not just in Hauora, Tairāwhiti, so acknowledging that as well. And just a few of the things that we've already put in place for the year ahead, and noting the comments from board members this morning about not being able to find parking is in part related to the amount of things that are actually just in that physical sense happening on the campus here at the moment. I also won't spend too much time on the financials because you've summed it up, Kim, in your comments around exactly what happened, and that comes up later on in the financial report as well. Just looking at highlights in that report then on page 17, starting to see as I said before, about the increase in the numbers of people coming through services, huge bounce back in the last month of the number of people admitted acutely to the hospital. But notwithstanding those downward points at the end of that second graph there around acute internal medicine acute admissions, you can see that the upward trend has actually been flattened off in the last probably more than 12 months, and we will want to make sure that continues on in the months ahead. And notwithstanding again on the top of page 18 with those very low points in the last couple of months around children admitted to hospital, it is our intention to keep on reducing the numbers of children that are admitted to hospital with an absolute focus around ambulatory sensitive hospitalisations. And it's good that the service level measures agreement that we have with our two PHOs this year hones in on both ambulance sensitive hospitalisations for 0 to 4s and for 45 to 64-year-olds. So that, so we're working at both ends of the spectrum to that, and really stressing too that the sorts of changes there, health contributes around about 20% to health outcomes, and the other 80% comes from other social and economic determinants of health. So we need to keep on with our work with Manaaki Tairāwhiti in that area as well. And we've talked about immunisation, faster cancer treatment, planned care. I would highlight that area, you talked about it as well, Kim, that we had a good bounce back on that in the last month of the year. We're over 100% production in June. The staff really pulled out all stops to get that back up again, and have continued on with that. It is proving difficult to do that given the increased numbers of people coming into the hospital with other conditions, but we haven't had to cancel or postpone any surgery so far in relationship to the demand pressures on the hospital. We have submitted our 1 year and 3 year action plan around improved performance for planned care. We're not, regardless of putting that plan down to the ministry, we are going to achieve the Director General's challenge to remove the COVID-19 backlog by the end of this calendar year. And last month we really managed to start on that. And there is a report later on in here specifically around that, around our recovery process. And that's sort of like a start point. We will be able to provide more detail around that once we've got our plan signed off with the ministry. The emergency department, as I said, numbers are coming up there again. There is a graph in there, top of page 24, around our flight service. I'm not sure whether you are finding it useful to get the level of detail we've proven there, but I think it's quite interesting around the numbers of people that are being flown in and out of our district and the value that is generated from the flight service and the team working within that. We're seeing a change though with code STEMI, so that is for people with an acronyms ACS, acute coronary syndrome, or in the old vernacular, people with heart attacks. That the current way of working with that is to send people directly to Hamilton. So we are seeing a lot more people that are coming here that are being diagnosed with a heart attack and are then just being directly sent, usually by helicopter, to Hamilton. And that means a few things. It means much faster care for those people, so that's excellent. More of their heart muscle is salvaged or not damaged, and that means that they have much better recovery, and which is good for everybody, them most in particularly, and their families and the community. And but it's for the health system, and it's better for the health system overall. However, it is making sure that there is the capacity in Hamilton to take those people acutely is important, and Jerry Devlin is going to be talking about that a little bit later on. But it does have a financial impact on the DHB, because helicopter subbing over is way more expensive than a fixed wing that we've been using, and it also is less utilisation of our fixed service, and we still need to have those people available and the planes available 24/7 to be able to transport other people. So it's one of those things that is there. The other thing that is also happening is code stroke for people who have stroke in our community, and expediting the pathway for them. So you'll know that not only do you need clot busting medication for people with heart attacks, and also then getting them over for angiography, and then possibly intervention through the angiography to clear any, to put in stents. Does everybody understand all these things?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. But also for stroke, we absolutely need to make sure that anybody who's got any symptoms of stroke comes to the hospital. Do not go to your GP. Do not go anywhere else. Phone up or come directly to the hospital if you've got any symptoms of stroke. Everybody knows fast. And because then we're able to ascertain whether that is a stroke that you need to have thrombolysis for, or also stroke clot retrieval, where we can fly people to Auckland and have this literally, and this is in my terms, have the clot scooped out and restore blood flow to your brain. And just last week we were able to achieve that for one person here. So that again is a massive benefit for that person, their family and the community. There's really good recovery if you're able to do that, and people not disabled or very much less disabled by the stroke able to return to work, all those sorts of things. So huge benefit for the community.
Jim,
it takes a lot of effort.
this is really good messaging, particularly for those who are joining us.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if you could just quickly run through fast.
I was hoping you weren't going to say that, but it's face, speech, and time. Time. Yep. So, if you see drooping of the face, if you have loss of function in your arm, and speech slurred or different, then you should
And then hurry.
and then hurry because time is brain. So quickly. And as I say, don't go to your GP. Come to the hospital and dial 111 if you need
Chopping
to.
to Auckland or fixing at Auckland?
Choppering to Auckland, 80 minutes flight time by chopper, and you go straight to the roof of Auckland City Hospital and down straight into the thing, because all of your, here we are able, with our CT machine that we specifically bought amongst other reasons for this purpose. When you come here, you get a variety of CTs, but including CT perfusion. So it's actually showing how much of your brain is still actually still receiving some blood flow, but not enough. And it also defines on whether it's a clot, first of all. If you've got a stroke because a blood vessel is burst within your brain, that cannot be fixed or nothing about. So we're looking principally at people who've had a clot that has blocked off a particular set of arteries within their brain, and we give them medication to try and dissolve that clot, but B, we also can thread a catheter up and scoop that clot out and release the blood flow back to that affected part of their brain. So we do what is called a CT perfusion now, so you can actually see what is happening, an image of what is happening with that person's brain. And then that enables us to see how much of the brain is still alive and will remain alive if we can get the blood flow flowing back to that. One of the things that this is really helpful for is that previously it was thought that you could only really do this within about 6 hours of the stroke. So you basically had to witness the stroke and see the person, or the person had to experience the symptoms themselves and get here in time to be able to be assessed and decisions made and then flown up to Auckland. Now with CT perfusion, we are able to check out what the symptoms are, and so we have got more capacity for people with wake-up stroke, because many people wake up with stroke, so they do not feel well in the evening, go to bed, I'm not feeling well, I go to bed, and during the night the stroke develops, and by morning I've got the symptoms. And previously those people weren't generally able to access thrombolysis or stroke clot retrieval because it was thought to be too long after the event. But now that we can actually image their brains and see just how much damage has occurred and whether there is the viable brain area to be revascularized, then that increases the numbers of people that we can rescue their brains and send them to Auckland to do that. This is particularly relevant from an equity point of view. Maori are more likely to have occlusive strokes or strokes with blood clots. And with our population and with some of the areas that our population live in, sometimes it's not as easy just to think, oh, I've got FAST, I'm straight off to the hospital. So it allows for more time to be able to get there and more chance of actually rescuing brain tissue for those people, principally Maori. So it's another equity issue. When we were buying the CT, this is the sorts of things we're looking at to be able to advantage our population who are comparatively disadvantaged because we live so far away from a stroke clot retrieval service. So it's a good news story.
It's a great news story.
So I noticed just yesterday the ministry sent out their updated Maori Response Action Plan. Director General sent out an email yesterday with it on. So it's out as a follow-on to the initial one. So that's good. Anyway, I'll take any questions about all the rest that was there.
Jim, I would have thought that admissions to ED would have had a real surge once we hit level 2, but they haven't really. It's only increased slowly, or is that still to come? You know, for the people that missed out for that 6 weeks, I thought maybe there would have been a big swing up, but there hasn't been. Or do you think it's still going?
Well, technically, those people that for whatever reasons didn't come over that period of time shouldn't be turning up in ED now, because they should have been, by very nature, long-term or slower conditions. They should have been going back to their general practitioner. And GPs are reporting that they are seeing people with conditions that they might have seen during lockdown that people didn't come in for. We haven't had a lot of reporting about that, and I know that I've seen some stats around cancer registrations, so they were down a bit, but not massively down. We've been looking at the number of deaths, and that they were not massively up. So, yeah, I think what actually did happen in that time was that people with really, unlikely that people stayed at home with chest pain, maybe angina, and they probably would have stayed at home with angina before. And again, we don't want anybody to be, if you've got angina, you need to go and see your GP about that. So maybe some of that happening, but it doesn't appear that that's had a major effect, but we're still monitoring that. But we wouldn't expect to see those people within the emergency department unless it is, they've had angina for a period of time, and then they have a full-blown heart attack, and that's where they turn up.
And with the it's just a brief mention on page 20, better have for smokers to quit, and it comes through on the dashboard, and that we've got the stats on that we're approaching people and sort of trying to intervene there. But what do we know a year later? Is there any sort of follow-up that how successful it's been?
Yeah. So studies of stop smoking quit programs show something like about 30 or 40% success rate. Yeah. On average, 7 attempts for people to quit. So every quit attempt is important, and we need people to make an attempt every time they feel like it. They should be supported to make a quit attempt, because we know that they'll get there. They just need that support.
Keep going. And the other thing with FAST was, what recommendation would you be giving to people at Ruatoria or somewhere up the coast? What's their option to deal with it?
Dial 111.
Yeah.
This enables better response for those people who are up the coast than they've ever had.
Yeah.
We know of a situation like that where someone was flown from Victoria to Auckland, to Waikato.
Yeah, that's probably what I'm getting to. Is it more an intervention that gets them direct access to Auckland rather than access to here and then
absolutely dial 111, because St John now have got the diagnostics and the support within the network of St John to actually make a decision about where is the best place to take that person. So they won't bring them here if that's not the best option. So they've got clinical advisors within St John that can actually make a decision and say that person just needs to go straight to Hamilton. Unlikely to go straight to Auckland for stroke, because you do need to have a CT first to decide whether that is an occlusive or hemorrhagic stroke, and so that radically changes the situation. And also, if it's a wake up stroke, you do need to be able to have CTP, perfusion, to understand what the situation is with that person's brain.
Will there be some more promotion out in the community? Because I know up the coast, for example, having a stroke is just like what happens up there. People don't think if it is a medical emergency because auntie had it, and so I'd like to see some promotion to say all is not lost, you can get saved.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I really think is strangely enough, it's a COVID-19 learning. So what I think we saw, and it was really interesting at the hui last week, is that really pronounced community action on the coast around health. People really saw that COVID-19 was a threat to the health of themselves and their whānau and their communities, and they really mobilised to address that threat. But every day, people have got the threat of having a heart attack, having diabetes, having a stroke, having all of those other things that are threats that are really, really pronounced within those communities. So I think, you know, one of the things that we talked about with Ngāti Pro was how do we mobilise that same energy to that, so that everybody does know in the community that if you go out to walk in the garden and you start to get pain in your chest or tightening in your chest, that is just not a normal thing of old age, and one should just ignore it or think that's what happened to mum or dad or whatever. So now's my turn because I'm getting a little bit older. It's not. It is something we can offer assistance and help with, and we can. So it's just mobilising the energy of around things that do occur, that we've got the ability to work with people and intervene, and if necessary, do dial 111. So I think that's the sort of energy COVID learning about the power of communities to be able to make this.
So just one question, and you touched on it in your earlier part of your report, Jim, talking about capturing the energy out of COVID and what it's given us. Where are we at with our IT systems, getting the learnings that came out of COVID, and how do we take them forward, I guess?
We've done quite a bit of work with Ngāti Pro in particular around, because they've actually got the technology on the coast now, and the bandwidth to be able to use that effectively. So we've got a bit of work going on there, both in person and remotely, to be able to support. One of the things that we've really geared up is getting our clinicians up there. Because we think one of the key ways of improving these utilisation of technology is for people to understand the end-to-end points. So, so that the team here know who they're talking with, the support people who are on the coast, the sorts of issues and ways of working for people there, and vice versa, so that everybody is joined up in that way, and then it makes the telehealth work. Because one of the barriers that we've seen around the utilisation of telehealth, we've had bursts of activity and then it's died away again. And we don't want that to happen this time. We actually want to cement those things in place. So what we've found is you can't really get away from that human contact in the first instance. And I'm talking about clinicians on the coast with clinicians here in joining that. And so we've gone up to the coast to be able to establish that. The other thing is how do you actually mix the face-to-face with the telehealth technology as well. And for instance, last week our ophthalmology team went up to Tupuia. They saw 18 people there and were able to do some direct interventions. They gave Avastin injections for people on the coast, and they saw other people, and they talked about their eyesight and what might be able to be done for that, and as a result of that have got people that are coming for cataract removals, those sorts of things. So some of that stuff you could do by telehealth, but you can't give an Avastin injection just yet by telehealth. So that would so it's how do you our real focus at the moment is how do we re-establish the links or revitalise the links, and then utilise the technology on top of that.
So that's sort of in the patient-facing space. What about behind the scenes when it comes to GPs having access to records from those clinicians' visits and things like that? So I guess it's just making it a little more seamless, that person's holistic health at IT space.
So we've run a system where at the moment where all test results, all of those sorts of things are actually electronically available to GPs, our own clinicians. It's the same database, it's the same information that everybody's sharing. Before we went into lockdown, we had perfected the ability for our clinicians to write clinic letters and post them directly to GPs and integrate them with their clinical records, so that everybody's on the same page in terms of that. But these are just steps along the way. It's always what is that? That's good, but what about this? So keeping it moving forward.
So post them electronically.
Yes, post them electronically. Yes, rather than post them through the mail.
Yeah.
There are national programs afoot where support for for general practice has been identified as one of the areas to continue to move the use of virtual interface. And so those things are initially underway. The first mainstream, one of a better word, has got a high focus on equity. And so their charge is to reach to those most rural and isolated populations in their piece of work. And there's another piece of work that's specifically for Māori that's been overseen by a national managers group who are also focused on ensuring that Māori have better access to the virtual utilisation by general practice.
Cool. I'd say
Can I
another
just,
couple. Sorry,
Can I just shine the light on
yeah.
something you just said? Because I think it kind of went under most people's radars, and that's the ophthalmology visit. So to me, that was, Jim talked to me about it on Friday afternoon, and I was really, really, I was just so delighted that we had followed that taking health to the people that we did over COVID, and our ophthalmologists took themselves up there and saw 18 people up there, and I was just really delighted with that. That's I can't imagine another day that 18 people on the coast have had an ophthalmology consultation and or intervention in a single day. So I just want to really shine the light on that. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, so there were 24 people booked for whatever reasons. Some people, a few people weren't able to get there, and obviously they'll need to be followed up. But then the Ngāti Hauora team rallied around and got other people to backfill that. So it made really good use of the day, and I think Abe Aston is a really good example of something that it makes really good sense to be able to deliver that service close to where people are, and Abe Aston saves people's sight, and that's a really important thing, and we want to make sure that people get access to that, and getting access to cataract removal is something that I think all of us generally would take for granted, but we need to make sure that everybody in our population is able to get access to that, and having the confidence of actually meeting the ophthalmologist and the specialist nurse up front gives people a lot more confidence that I will do this, I can get it done, and makes a huge difference to me. I would say that that we've had clinics regularly, always have clinics regularly for general surgery, medicine and paediatrics on the coast. And this year, as one of our equity improvement actions in the annual plan, we are recruiting a fifth ONG, and one of the purposes of that is to enable to re-establish ONG clinics on the coast as well. So that will be another improvement of actually, we want to particularly improve outcomes for babies, and that will be a way in which we can support that.
I think it would be fair to say though that every clinic needs the capacity to support it, that end. And I think that's probably, there have been lots of clinics delivered up the coast over the years, and from time to time the capacity of having a patient list, organising appointments is just too much for a team that's up there, and that would be one of the reasons why sometimes it's not possible. Speaking from experience.
We talked about that in terms of the ophthalmology clinic, like, okay, what needs to be put in place to make sure that people who had their first injection are lined up to get their next injection at the time it's due.
I was going to say, just one thing I was mentioning about when you were talking about telehealth, that I just also noticed yesterday that the Director General was talking about a specific program that the ministry has actually organised with Vodafone, Spark and 2 Degrees about making many health-related websites free for people to access. So many people may have a device, but they don't have the data to be able to actually interact with those websites, to actually roll that out and make that. And that was something I wanted to talk about with the PHOs this afternoon, about what sites they would want to make sure are able to be accessed free. And I'm thinking for the coast, Manage My Health would be a perfect example of something that you should be able to get free on to be able to access all of your health information. And on there, you can read your own letters from, and that sort
And
of
that's
stuff.
where I've been sort of needling for the entire time, is that capacity to holistically manage personal health.
You're really into health when you talk about needling. That's
trying to see that.
You're losing your voice.
Yes, with regard to the review of mental health and addiction, I attended 2 public openings of meth walk-in spaces this last week. What's our role in that particular space, as far as a whole bunch of community people who are trying to address this huge issue of methamphetamine in community, have set up these walk-ins where they're getting a lot of grandparents who are raising mokopuna due to meth impacts. I met some amazing people who've had involvement with meth for 20 years. I was kind of like, what? But what's our role in those community spaces? And also, with regard to reforms, that we make a submission as a board, because we have issues with marijuana as a starting kind of drug that could lead people into other drugs. Do health boards make submissions in respect to the legislation, the referendum that's before us? So those were my 2 questions.
So with regard to your first question, the model of care for mental health, and then the step into, so I think the 2 clinics you're talking about, the 2 walk-ins are under the Tutanarimu's drive. We've been very, very supportive of the work that he's done, and the teams from PHB continue to support him. Yesterday, we were advised of the regional growth fund and the success of Maori Tupuna, which is a whānau enterprise working with whānau to put practical supports, systems in place for whānau to be supported to work through what the issues with methamphetamine are. That's a primary function behind that piece of work. We also received support for counsellors and the hubs both at Elgin and at Acute to be further supported. That alongside of the work that the DHB has been doing in terms of proceeds of crime and regional support to support people on a journey where they may need to receive support elsewhere, but their whānau and themselves and be supported both up to that point while they're away and on their return. So that piece of work is currently in process of bringing the threads together. Kim Whangakippa was quick off the block yesterday to be in touch with us, so we're already working with that Roku. But we have been working with them anyway. They were participants in the development of the model of care. Just on the model of care, you'll receive the next stage of the next month's meeting. So we are committed to supporting the overarching understanding of what's going into place over the next 2 or 3 years by bringing a network of people together who have responsibility in some form or other to either be in governance or be on the ground or be part of the team that helps to support the teams to establish. So we hope that that broader Rōpū summit will come together in the next 2 months so that we can be very, very clear about who's doing what, how and when, so that those things can be supported well by our community and that we can support our community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In terms of support, one of the things that that we've discussed around this table and also previous tables was, and I think it's appropriate that the Rōpū that leads that is around stay facilities, and we've had those kinds of conversations. And I I did see that Mecca had put out a corridor about us receiving 2 million or something like that in regards to meth, helping fight the meth plague in our community. And it was, the way that you put it out there was specifically for that. And I couldn't find too much in regards to the haunting side here. I did maybe think it was the Tairāwhiti Matua program or something like that. But I do want to know what our support practically looks like. I know that we're involved in having conversations and supporting a principal, these things, and trying to form up a program and a model and all of that kind of stuff. But are we supporting in way of people? Is there plans to support in way in terms of people? Is there plans to support in ways of for lack of a better term, drying out facility kaupapa that we had conversations about? Are those in the plans?
So the regional addiction fund that I spoke about, two parts to that. The first is the Provincial Growth Fund didn't support a feasibility study for identifying where is a place for addictions, but we are seeking to be able to undertake that in some form or other, so that we can get a landing on good idea, not good idea. So that is something that we will progress, despite the fact that the funds weren't part of it.
Cool.
The second thing is that the regional addiction funds are not about building buildings to have people detox them. We do have funding actually currently that enables people to be in supported detox, which is a medical function. But we are wanting to work with our community to say how is this best established. And it may well be that there are local environments that support both the whānau and the individual that aren't necessarily hospital type services that would support them coming to a place where they're all on the same kaupapa and have all agreed with the treatment plan that this is where we're heading to. But until we can work with our communities on what that might look like for them and the people who are affected by the addiction, we can't tell you it's going to be 2 beds in the inpatient unit, for example. The ownership of how people move through a recovery program in that sense belongs to the whānau. Maori Pono has that at the heart of how they work. So they won't be excluded from the discussions, but these are the sort of additional components that support a community drive its own determination about how they do this work. And we know there are some areas where this might be easily developed. It could be in marae environments, it could be in areas that people have developed, particularly for healing, that become engaged with the journey forward. And things that aren't here today, that we are comparing things to.
Okay. May I just ask a couple of questions on this? Because what I like about this corridor is that the Hauora Tairāwhiti is supporting whānau-led initiatives. So I think that's a crucial element to this. What I would be concerned about is whether or not the funding criteria doesn't lend itself to the same philosophy. Is that what you're explaining?
So we have been working actively in the last 2 or so years to particularly work with Te Matua and thinking about how does this make sense to what you know exists. We don't see ourselves as the experts. But we run a fine line between what the funding expects and what we know works in our communities. And so our function to a certain degree is to work with the Ministry of Health to help them change their expectations. And some of the work we are touching on is looking at how we're required to work. So there are a whole set of policies that exist that says when you are doing this, this is the thing that you have to use. In fact, those things are really dated. We need to have our ministry colleagues on board with us when we are doing innovative opportunities that they can support us, but we need to be able to give them the information. So political kaupapa, that's an ongoing challenge when you have a set of specialists who believe through their training that this is the only way that you can deal with whānau who are in this predicament. And yet we have a community who have an experience and wealth of knowledge embedded and able to transfer that into what makes a practical difference. Give her up. And so part of our role is to support a, if not equal recognition that both have value, that we try to support both models to support our whānau.
Yeah, because we have examples of that, previous examples of that here in Tairāwhiti, Te Watawata. So the template, I think, has been set. It's a matter of
We've got two. We've got Te Rere Matua and Te Watawata, and both of those have proved valuable. It's building off that. And Te Roku Matua are the roku that have supported those two evolutions.
So this conversation has been something that's come up on the board and then escalated this way, and I actually think it would be useful if we put this on an action list for a formal paper so that we're all talking from a common understanding of what's our base of information, so that we as a board can think about, okay, what steps do we think we would like to be taking here? Because I can see we could talk on this particular issue for quite some time. So can we action list that as to make sure that we all sort of come to a point of common understanding of where we're at, and then we can have an informed discussion about where to next with it.
I mean, I think that's fantastic to do, because some of the feedback at that forum was still trying to figure the 20 million for facility as to a rehab calling. So it was still some uncertainty.
Yes, and you know the effort that's been put in to try and explain that many times. So and we're happy to keep on explaining that, because I think it's important that people are clear about that. I think the announcement yesterday was very significant in that was a piece of work from Manaaki Tairāwhiti, utilising the knowledge and skills of the people working in Te Ranga Health, Maori te Pono, and it was coming at the problem from a different direction. That's great, because it just broadens out the range of options and ways of working, so that it isn't just you've got a problem with addiction, you need to see the psychiatrist and the addiction nurse, but actually maybe not. Maybe there's different ways of doing this. And what we do know is that we've done a rough tally up, and it's going to be about a 50% increase in the amount of funds available within our community in this 12-month period around the issue of drugs and alcohol within our other drugs and alcohol within our community. So that's a really big change. And I thought I'd just briefly mention that at Hiwa Itirangi last week, we had a conversation about models and ways of working, and we talked about some work that we were doing with our colleagues at the Ministry of Health to enable them to see the benefit of looking at doing things differently, and with the work that we're doing with Te Roku Matua, and we're very pleased to say that our colleagues have seen that there is seen the light, and so that's good. We can move forward with that now.
Are there any more comments on the youth report?
Yeah, just in regards to the about mental health facilities, can you remind me how much have we received of that yet? I know that there was a business case, right, that's just been approved, and that's contingent on zero. Yeah, I thought that it was still zero.
Well, that's because we haven't asked for anything. We haven't asked for any money.
We haven't had a official
sign off of our business.
that it's been endorsed by the job ministers, which we're still trying to get.
Oh, well, I can tell you exactly about that, because there's a text I've just received this morning about that, because I knew this would come up. So this is from Michelle Arrowsmith, who's the Deputy Director General of something to do with DHB. You don't know the official title. Is it? Oh, yeah, okay, you've got it. So she's saying that the Capital Investment Committee endorsed our single stage business case of $18.8 million. but the budget still remains at $20 million. And the confirmation will come out in writing when that's all signed out. I did just go back to Michelle and say to her that one of the things that I think we will do need to take into consideration, particularly now, is to see that we've actually got adequate isolation type facilities within there. Because one of the issues that has arisen in COVID was the ability to combine, a response to somebody who may be COVID positive or maybe have some other, health issue at the same time as with mental health needs, and would seem crazy to be building a facility in the 21st century that didn't cover off that. So I'm not sure that we took that really greatly into consideration. So I suspect we might have to spend a bit more to make sure that's.
That's good news, because that's 2.8 million more than their initial indication to us.
Yeah.
Still not quite there, but
1.2, 18.8.
yeah, but their initial indication was 16, wasn't it?
16.5.
Yeah.
That was their recommendation.
Yeah.
Jim, is that public discussion at this point or not?
Well,
I would just with the public. So I knowing the public were there. I just think it's important that
that's
keep
right.
on moving.
This is part of an announcement that was made by the Prime Minister a year ago.
Yes.
No,
So this is the.
So it's actually just the background now.
Yeah, it's
Fronting's been done.
So just additionally, in them endorsing it means what for our bank account? But that's what I want, because like it's been highlighted, the Prime Minister said we're going to get this funding a year ago. It's taken this long for our business case there, to get an endorsement. What does that actually mean in regards to timeframes?
That's their endorsement, so go to the joint ministers, so finance and health will get a sign off.
So the next thing is them signing off, and then
we would have a cash flow of, you can have, you'd have this much at this point for your costs that we've already spent on the consultants and all of that process, and then there will be another chunk of money for the next, because they say it's going to take you 12 months to go from approval to actually having the design done, and then to be able to go out to tender. So all we've got at the moment is a basic concept about this is what it would look like, and all those sort of things. But we have to get down to decide where every light switch is, and all of those sorts of things. And so that's what they say can take 12 months to do. But we've already said that no, we want to try and speed that up. But you've got to have the right people in the room. You've got to have whānau, you've got to have the experts, you've got to have staff, you've got to have our community-based providers that are going to be working with people coming and going through this place, all of those sorts of people to do that properly and come out the other end.
Absolutely, I agree. It's just that but the reason why I ask is because there's a big gap between an announcement and us even receiving the putia, right?
Sticking his spade in the ground.
Don't give us 20 million.
Because the mental health unit, a mental health and addictions unit is not a shovel-ready bam. You're going to do it, because to do that you have to pick a design off the shelf and plonk it on the site. And I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I was asking the question in regards to just checking the fact around about how much we received now, and I don't think it's actually well known out there that we've received zero.
I think the other thing that's
relevant.
important is that what we receive can only be spent specifically on what's been proved in the business case. So it's
not going to disappear.
No, and it's not service funding.
Exactly. I think there's knowing out there about the fact that it's for a building, and I do actually think that it's relevant because of because the perception is that there was an announcement and we've either whittled that fund away or all that kind of stuff. Like in the absence of information, the stories would just make themselves up, right? So it is actually important to ask the question if we received anything, and it's important equally to say no.
Because it has been 5 weeks since the Federal Investment Committee met on the 23rd of June. You get through the first gate of not getting pushed back, other business cases go up. I know a number of them have been up community facilities this round and get pushed back for more information. So to get through and get endorsed is
That's actually
Good. Yeah, I do want to commend the staff too, because it's such a big task, and having things come back from having a business case keep getting kicked back about, requiring more detail or more questions answered and things like that. So yeah, I do really want to commend yourself and the team in regards to being persistent, because you're persistent on behalf of the rest of us, right? I really do want to commend you guys.
We haven't had repeated pushback from them, have we?
No, we did it once.
Just
Yeah,
got one through,
yeah. And I think, Josh, that's really important, because the team of people that have worked on this, and it's not just yet, that's not Hauora or Tairāwhiti stuff. We really need to give credit to all of those, the whānau advisors, the whānau, themselves that are involved in that to get to that point. Put in all that work over lockdown, principally, to get it done. And they actually submitted the business case 3 months earlier than what had originally been planned. So we've already cut 3 months off this time frame.
Yeah, just to highlight that we're doing everything we can on this end. It's the other end. So, sorry, I did still have more. In regards to the ophthalmology stuff, are we planning on making that part of our BAU around delivering those kind of services up to the coast and connecting up there?
Yes, because it's not, as Kim said, there's no point in going up there once and then never going back again.
Do we have an idea about how often?
No, I can't give you that now.
In terms of plan care around the SPs, I really thank you so much for the extra information in regards to numbers and percentages. The phrase that's often used in there is we're non-compliant. What percentage is compliance?
Compliance is that 100% of people who are given a date for their first business assessment get it within 4 months, and then 100% of people, that's SP2 and SP5 is 100% of people given certainty about their treatment get it within 4 months. So that's compliance.
Okay. Yeah, I just wasn't too sure what the percentage was there. Now we have
we have tolerances and other things, but we don't in that.
Okay. Sorry, just to have another look at my. Just to make sure that I've asked all the things.
Extra information is excellent. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, well, there'll be more than that, because within the actual plan itself, there are, by each specialty, there are this phasing about what it's going to look like over the next months. So as capacity changes and improves, then we see the rate of change speed up. And so, yes, but we haven't provided that as yet until we get those signed off with ministry.
No, that's it from.
Okay. Last question on Jim's report, and then we can move on.
I don't know the difference between one SAC 2, but don't describe it to me now. But can you just email it out? Okay. Thanks.
I just want to say thanks for the sexual health youth. It's my passion, and there's some really good cordial to what we've been up to, because I'm on T-Shag. I just emailed you. So we were going to work at Good Vibes, but got cancelled. But I'm just really grateful for this cordial.
Good.
Okay, so we're just going to take a 5 to 10 minute break. Our coffee has arrived, and then we will resume with your report, Craig. Are we able to mute while we're having coffee?
You're fine.
Okay, welcome back everybody. So we will move straight into item 6.5, financial. Craig, if there's anything further other than what we've already discussed that you want to highlight for us, Craig?
I just got through, so a good result for the month. 117k favourable budget, but the three arms up there, 460k is for the wide arm, 268 favourable for funder, 83k favourable for split the various arms on page 29. So I have P&L, page 30, one balance sheet, sorry, in the $1 million equity performance from this in April was still working capital requirement. Probably in excess of our current liabilities to pay out. Sorry, excess of our current liabilities. Page 32. You see that we've got $12.9 million in the bank. Last year we were in overdraft by $580,000. It's the first time we've had that in a long time. Capital program, we're $1 million favourable to budget for the month. This is just from a cash position. We put our commitments for what's ready to go. That takes it down to about $2 million, which we're rolling forward into the 2021 program that we're going forward next month for consideration. And we have come summary on page 33. So we're as a BA here, we're 10.7 million deficit for the year. We got a present of close to $1 million for holidays act that we've pushed through. And our 1.5 million reverse for expenditure. Page 34, this is just a typical reconciliation that we submit to the board around this time. We've got another one next month as we make that submission for the ministry on the 10th of August. So the same year in addition, that's actually $13.8 million. Whereas accruals and mock-ups process here today. So 8886 for emergency loss service leave, whereas payroll prisons, you can see the reversal of our 1.8 million, that's our soft accrual. Typically, it's on one that's around $480,000. So we put down there to soften the landing at year end. So we look at points 1, 8 and 9, that's about 1.5 million. So and we just carried on in a normal vein, we would be claiming a $1 million variance. And it gets us down to our 13.1 million position, which we're forecasting. There was a little bit of risk there on as we're working through our period dating adjustments, about 500, down half a million risk factor in there as we're working through leave liability. Just got a difference between what payroll is provided through the automated calculation and what we're seeing from financial sort of workings of the calculation. So that'll be resolved next week.
Thank you, Craig. Does anyone have any on the financial report?
Yeah, thanks. A constant in these reports is that the nursing personnel is over budget. Is there an unrealistic budget set for the nursing personnel?
Well, we just said that as we're having worked a lot of down on the street as we're working through this year's budget and working down from 13% down to 6 million down to 4 million this year. And he was visual eye over the numbers and the budget submissions that we put down there, and it's where that our FTE and payroll data is bang on the money. So it's really good. But we do have trade-offs. When we come to this position, we've got a number in mind, and the ministry our owners has another number. So there was trade-offs where that comes from. It's going to come out of payroll, it's going to come out of consumables, supplies.
Yes.
We have an increase in.
The answer is yes.
I was like looking at, so it's good to see on the consolidated P&L on page 30, during percentage increases versus last year, so it's the average revenue gets a better gauge because we're looking at actuals versus actuals rather than constructing the budget. So this includes so we're at 8.6% up on prior year. We did payroll increases through the settlements.
Another funding round negotiation process coming up, haven't we?
Yes, the MECA expires the end of this month. Yeah.
Which is being managed centrally.
Yes, we're already in negotiations with them to know about that. We're holding a series of stop work meetings next month through, most of next month across the country. We will be considering this.
So the stop work meetings are rolling up, or we're due for a review, did you say, or a rollover?
The MECA expires on 31 July, so the end of this week. We bargaining is always initiated before a MECA expires. It's 90 days before the end of a MECA that you can, it's 90 days that you can initiate bargaining. So it's been bargaining with them for a period of time. We've probably had about 6 days of bargaining with NZ. And so the stop work meetings are to consider the progress, and there may be ballots with the members.
So when you say we, it's not we as in TDH, it's we as a
health sector.
As a health sector.
Yes,
right.
yes, the DHB's collectively.
Thank you.
So just picking up the point on nursing personnel, Andy, there's probably a broader issue in here about the costs of outsourced personnel. So have you got any comment to make on that?
Me or Craig?
Either of you.
No,
generally.
Just generally.
Yeah.
Well, I think you see there, if you're looking at using Craig's figures there on page 30, you'll see that our total outsourced services was a 3.8% reduction in the amount of expenditure on outsourced services last year compared to the year before. So we are trying to utilise less outsourced services, and the main driver of those costs are in outsourced medical personnel and outsourced clinical services, both of which are related to medical staffing. So you see that outsourced medical personnel were down by 7% and clinical services down by 4.7%. So we are really honing in on that as an area where we can control costs in a way that actually enhances service provision, because we actually have people here employed and on the ground as opposed to bringing them in on contract.
Yeah.
Okay, any further comments on the financial report?
How much of that outsourced medical services would just be things that we'd just have to live with? Like ideally we'd want to outsource everything, but we can't because of how small our population is and how regional we are. So just for my own thinking and understanding, how much of that 5 million actual is stuff that we would definitely have to do here? How much of that is stuff that we could progressively also move to be more in-source?
A good proportion of that will always be there because it's around some of the services that we're never likely to ever recruit to and provide here, small services, specialised services where we do have to bring people in to provide that service for the population here, particularly some areas of medical specialties. I'm going to think of things like dermatology or those sorts of small groups of services. So I don't see us eliminating those completely, but I would draw your attention, and I'm just trying to find it in a hurry, to page 77, which is in the cover page to the current annual plan, and you will see there that we have got a plan this year specifically to convert outsourced to in-sourced around 1 of our SMOs within medicine, 1 within psychiatry, 3 within the emergency department, and 1 within obstetrics and gynecology. So those are areas where we do see that we can make progress this year. And similarly also within allied health, within pharmacy. And we've been very, very successful. And Carl will probably talk about that in terms of recruiting there, and in anaesthetic tech maybe a little bit more of a long shot, but we're certainly going to give that a go. So yeah, so that's part of our program. As you can see, we've been reasonably successful with that in the last 12 months, so we believe we can keep on that success, and it will help us with our plan for the current financial year.
So Jim, sort of building on Josh's question, so we have a percentage in the rating column back at page 30, 7% down, 4.7. That's on a budget, but that's a budget. So it'd be really helpful.
That's financial.
Yeah, it's a financial. So it'd be really helpful to sort of have a presentation of, like you just referred to, but in an ideal world, we would be having, how far over the ideal number are we at any given time, as opposed to a dollar value. Have we got 14 positions we'd like to fill, or 12, or 10, or 4, or 57? And therefore 57 are costing us $1 million a month.
Yeah, so I guess so that would be where we've got, so we've got 2 groups of people, and as Josh said before, we've got a group of people that we are not actively, we're always looking for solutions to some of our problems in terms of some of those smaller areas and services. So we're always looking for those, but those are the more intractable ones. But the other ones where we are expecting, we have seen improvement, is around where we've been consistently outsourcing some of the things like emergency medicine specialists, for instance, where we have been particularly successful at recruiting. So we've got a whole new era there in terms of our emergency department. So those are sorts of areas where you're particularly interested, I would expect, in what proportion of the current nearly $9 million we're spending on outsourced services. How are we going to make that kind of change?
Yes, please. It's a story which just needs to be we'd all like to see how we're making some progress, or assist to make some progress.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. No more questions. Sorry, I've been really rude. We have 2 of our clinicians joining us at the board table today. So would you like to introduce yourselves to the board table?
Start. So good day, everybody. My name is Carl Mcdonald. I am the Director of Allied and Technical. I have had the pleasure of meeting and working with some of you guys in the past, and I have been asked by Jim, and I just thank you, Kim, for inviting a clinical perspective. So in a very brief summary, I won't hog your time. Allied and Technical is a vast workforce. I have many people that have to advise me, because as a physiotherapist by background, I've got a directorate that consists of 40 plus professions, both within the DHB, the community, and I work in partnership with people like Sarita, who is the Director of Nursing, and with the CFO and Director of Midwifery as well. But where they are more kind of profession specific, I have to go a lot wider, and I have to consult a heck of a lot about representing these professions accurately and appropriately. And I guess what I bring is clinical partnership. I still have a clinical practicing certificate. I still work clinically at times. But I guess my role is around the direction and setting the tone with regards to where the allied and technical professions need to go, making sure that they are clinically relevant, working according to best practice, working in a professional way that encounters our medical and nursing and other colleagues, and actually partners with and moves us forward. So thank you very much. And I will sit down.
If my memory serves me correct, Heckle and Coates is your predecessor.
Yes, yeah, for a short period of time, we can now take it on first.
And then he moved on.
Yes.
Thanks, Rita.
And Morena Koutou, I'm Sarita Karodia. I'm the Acting Director of Nursing, Quality and Patient Safety, at least the latter part for a week. And just like Cole, I have a remit that's pretty big, but not as versatile as what he does. So I consider myself quite lucky because it's a little bit cleaner, but my contribution to nursing comes from my own background. I was raised on the coast, and so as equally passionate around nursing, I am about equity. So I have a big focus on that as well. And as you've just heard, we're going through a lot of negotiations, a lot of movement with nursing, but nursing actually has a big potential to provide a lot of the services, homegrown, that you've been talking about. So I've got a lens on that to try and progress it.
Well, thank you both for joining us, and just by way of open invitation, while we're talking about things, if there is something that you feel we need to say, please do feel free to say it, because we've invited you here to provide a clinical perspective and inform our decision making. So please do feel free to speak up. Kia ora. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move to our report back from committees. So Heather, there was nothing in the Finance and Audit Committee that was in the public agenda? No, okay. And Josh, today?
I mean, according to page 36, our subcommittee doesn't even exist. But,
I know we met.
No, but it was a great week. We had our first we had our two T1 we had a great kōrero and a great presentation from Te Rōpū Mātua in regards to the recontextualising around kaiawhina. So we all have kaiawhina doing mahi in the community, just in those whānau spaces, in those cultural contexts like that. And it's a really great conversation about the qualifying of that expertise and the impact that has inside of the community, and how that qualification comes around, which is so to give also context, Te Rōpū Mātua is our like a collaboration between ourselves and the iwi health providers and community, etc. And they've often said, and we've often recognised, there's this expertise out there. How do we ensure that this expertise, how do we ensure that the expertise is recognised in a work context, in a health provider context and stuff. So that was really good. Really good conversation, really good presentation. It was a great hui. This is one I'm glad that Naz passed down a message, actually, because this is one of those things that we kind of had a little kōrero about too at that table. And I thought that it was the case that we would, because we did accept the T1 reps at the committee, but because things in the decision making is kind of done around this table, that they should be formally endorsed. By this table. So I would actually seek this table's endorsement of our two T1 reps, Ngā Raihania and Te Aturangi Nepia Clank. I don't know in terms of the official endorsement of the name, but if that needs to happen at this table as well, then that would be great. I do want to give a historical context in regards to Hiwai Te Rangi. Yes, T1 had been asked to give the name, and this was actually I know it's an indication of where we're heading to in regards to our health service provision and how we want to do things collaboratively. But also, if it was left up to me, we would have a very boring name. It would just be the All of Health Systems Committee, because I'm that creative. But yeah, Na's right. Like the name Hiwai Te Rangi came out really quickly, had a really good rationalisation, and everyone just rallied around that name really, really well. But just to check that that T1 wasn't kind of getting away with itself, it was asked that I talked to Papa Taina to run the name past, and I dedicated some time. I dedicated, a chunk of time to have a kōrero with Papa Taime, and yeah, he was like, yeah, great name, progressive, forward thinking, yeah, good, and that was the endorsement in it. Aspirational, aspirational. But that's what Hiwi Te Rangi is, to give us context. Hiwi Te Rangi is the 9th star of Matariki. And if we look at Matariki as the stars, the 9 stars of Matariki, the first star about the past, the middle are about the now, and then the latter ones are about the future. Hiwi Te Rangi being the last star is about aspiration and what we're looking for moving forward, which is really appropriate in regards to that committee, in regards to this table, in regards to that focus that Nga had brought up earlier on when accepting his his paddle. So very, very appropriate name. And it's one of those things where you go, man, it's actually atua level of stuff, how it just kind of came out and then got that kind of approval. So I would be seeking the board's endorsement endorsement of those members of T1 to our committee, and then also of the name if it's needed. Nancy?
I just wanted to add that I thought it was a historical meeting because we had all of the representatives of Te Rōpū Matua together around the table.
Yes.
And while you can read things on paper, it's not till you see everyone around the table, you can talk to them, you can listen to them, that you realise the significance of that group and their role. So,
you're right. And so, we had NPH leadership there. We had Kuwata leadership there. We had Tūmana Health leadership. It was really it's great.
So just in following up your request for endorsement of those actions of Hiwi Te Rangi, I'm just putting to the board with any further discussion on endorsing the name and membership from Te Waiaoro o Nukutai Miha.
No.
Ka pai, then we can, Jim.
I just wanted to ask, because we'd had a little bit of conversation about timings of meetings.
Yes.
And I just thought it would be good, just while everybody's around the table, to talk about a proposal that T1, Te Rangi and FRAC all occur on the same day, which will need some careful work around the ordering and timing. But some people are involved in more than one of those committees. It probably, from a management point of view, it's useful to be able to, I'm going to say this the right way, but to get all those meetings over in one day. But anyway, in an integrated fashion, that's 1 week out from the board meeting. So just how we would accommodate which is which. But if you're having a general
travel.
Yeah, and for those who travel, so what comes first, what comes second, what comes third across the day.
And I think other considerations we need to have in there in terms of what committee meets when is probably mostly with you, Josh, if you're intending to take your committee out away from the campus. To show with you now if what's the best coordination arrangement.
Let's go with Josh.
And go 1, 2,
Yeah. No, I think it's honestly cutting down meeting times, meeting days, having them all in one day cuts back on costs associated with all of these things. So it really is a great idea to line them all up on the same day, so we've been tossing around. So, and if it works, let's do it.
Yes.
So, Jim, can we ask you to work with Heather and Josh to sort out timing issues, and bearing in mind the signal that probably T1 and Hiwi Te Rangi would be consecutive in there, not one at the beginning and one at the very end of the day, but so that where that membership overlap can just flow through.
Thank you.
Ka pai. Okay. So I'm going to move us on to item 7.1, which is the item on complaints to the Health and Disability Commissioner for the period of 31 December. And before I pass over to who's going to lead this discussion, there's just some parameters I think we need to put around our discussion on this. And those are that we need to remember these are complaints that have been referred for investigation, that have been investigated, where relevant have been referred for disciplinary action. And really the most important thing in this report, to my mind, is assurance for the board about what's happened, assurance for the board around the quality of our services, and learning for the clinicians about you know, this happened, it went wrong, this is how we can learn from it. So the important parameter I want to put around this is is not a table to pick over the cases, because the appropriate professionals have already done that. So with that limitation in mind, who am I passing this over to?
These two here, because that's part of the reason why they're here.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Literally a hospital pass.
So, I mean, it's not completely blind. Jim has said this is part of how he sees this interaction with us. Just to reiterate that we had to learn and improve, and when it comes to a lot of the time it is the system at fault that put people in a situation where they could have done better, and I think that needs to be our jumping off point, is that yes, we don't want any of this stuff to ever happen again, and there are some system fixes here where I think it's very easy to kind of put it back into, you do some further education, or you go on a course and you get better. I don't think that's really going to move us forward. It is about looking at what is the system fix here, and how can we make sure that there's force functions built in so that this doesn't happen. Be that in a grand round, that we've got a terms of reference, and that we actually say, listen, this is what we're going to discuss.
Also, can
No.
I wanted to ask, in the list of complaints areas, I didn't find any criteria around cultural complaints, whether or not that there is a list, or whether or not there have been some laid in the cultural context, and whether or not that counts under a clinician-specific type of approach. So I wanted to identify if that was the case. Because the only Walker said, if we've got any queries, send to his, putting this up now, sure, and have dialogue on this thing will say. So that was the thing. I couldn't find anything specific to cultural, whether it be cultural competency, whether it be cultural understanding, any of those areas around an equity-based approach.
I would say that when it comes to the things that have gone to Health and Disability Commissioner, there will be cultural elements in it. We do have an incident reporting system called Tairāwhiti, so there are things that would be lodged under that. But I mean, from what I only have the same information as you in this regard. So if there's cultural specific queries, I would say that Datex is the place for it to go, and for it to go into a centralised place that we can look at it. And then we will, of course, partner with people like Peter Brown and actually unpick that. I don't know about criteria.
Yeah, it's just so if it's not on here, then I would take it there'd be no cultural complaints.
I think you will see it is actually on page 49, failure to accommodate cultural needs. 4 of the complaints in the communication area were around that. But I don't think that the HDC, I think they struggle in that table to actually come, because many complaints have a number of components to them.
Yes.
And cultural is absolutely a component of that. So I think this taxonomy that they've got here, they've tried to sort of put the main issue in there. So so that will only be the ones where I think it's specifically around that.
Some of those cultural complaints won't get to HDC.
They won't
get to HDC, they'll be managed locally.
Yeah. So I think it's important to remember this is how HDC captures the information.
Yes. So will that then prompt someone to notify that, if it's couched under something else, can we uncouch that and allow that process to come through? So
I think that generally what complaints to the HDC tend to be based around is a poor clinical outcome in the main. And so if there are cultural components to that, then that's when they are there. And, if they're, that's the sort of main driving force for people to make a complaint to the Health and Safety Commission and for the Commission to investigate them. So there's, sometimes there are, as Nicholas talked about, there may be issues around approach from a cultural perspective that's more likely to be developed, as she says, more likely to be addressed locally than get through the HDC, especially if there's no overt clinical, there's going to be outcomes of that, but maybe no so much an overt clinical outcome.
One of the rights under the code is right 1, the right to be treated with respect, and paragraph or sub-point 3 is every consumer has the right to be provided a service that take into account the needs, values and beliefs of different cultures. That's the only cultural reference in the legislative framework for the Commissioner. But building on what Ngā says is actually, do we openly advertise and educate and promote that within this space? I don't know.
So when considering complaints, the Commissioner does draw on more than that. So the Commissioner will also draw on, for example, the professional standards that are issued by the regulatory authorities, by the Medical Council and the Nursing Council and the Physiotherapists Board. And so those are essentially the standards that the Commissioner draws on to assess whether or not those standards have been met.
Yes, building on what you were saying, because my question before you jumped on in there was about the equity lens, because that's our key focus. And how do we ensure that all of those involved in the matrix of collection have that in there? Like, we talk about it, we hear it talked of, it's broadcast in spaces, but do the average person, who's coming into the space of saying, I'd like to lay out a complaint, no, but that sounds like or feels like if the person that they're complaining to doesn't raise it or sort.
So what I'm going to do, our discussion is getting away on our presenters, so I'm going to pass back to you two to present the paper, and then we'll pick up discussion.
Kim, thank you very much. It's for me, it's not so much a presentation, it is about kind of pulling over all this. We're here as in there's clinical outcomes that were missed, but to the point where it went to HDC, and we want to learn of those and not repeat those mistakes. And for us to be able to do that in a consistent way, we have some processes in place, including our incident management, where we log some of these things. We've got a clinical governance committee where we meet and discuss these are clinical risks that we see, and this is how we're going to address them. And then we also have you guys to report back to and actually to partner with. So I guess my take on this is that organisationally, this stuff happens to us. Our response is how are we going to improve? If our response is that we are going to send people on more training, that's probably part of it, but it's about the system transformation that gives us a different outcome going forward. And it is changing the culture of how we interact with patients and whānau, and how those outcomes will improve because of how we behave, as well as making sure we've got robust processes in place where if you show up and the clinician has got a view of what's going on for you clinically, that is as wide as it possibly can. Because what I kind of referred to in the first instance, in regards to that cardiology complaint, I could see how that very easily could happen, where you don't have the full view of that patient's clinical picture. You take on what you look, if you're a hammer, you're going to look for nails and you're going to go and do that part without considering the wider picture. And I think that's something that needs to be on your radar, that our system needs to be robust enough to make it as consistent for those clinicians as possible to make the right decisions. And that's something that I picked out of that first case, is that there is a system component.
Our system and our culture.
So do all of these complaints go via our internal system, or do they go direct to HDC?
Dave, I would expect that there's probably some crossover. If we are hearing, if someone has a complaint, there is the likelihood is it will go into our Datex type system as well as, but it could go externally to HTC.
There's no requirement.
There's no, that was what I was after, is how it flows. So we're not necessarily capturing all of these within our internal system. No, okay. Thank you.
So are clinicians exempt from cultural appreciation? It's probably my question.
No.
Then how do you know that if it's not captured in the data? How are we assured that that is the case?
So the medical council and the nursing council both have got cultural competency and cultural safety standards that nurses and doctors are required to, to basically meet alongside professional conduct standards and professional competence. So they've got a specific set of things. I presume physiotherapists board does.
So all of our, generally, so we have regulated and unregulated professionals. So the ones that have their regulating authorities, it looks very similar across the board. What I see is the clinical, if you've got clinical competence but you don't have cultural competence, your outcomes just don't match. So you could be an excellent clinician with no ability to meet the person where they need to be, and your outcomes are going to be poor, and that's how I will tell. If you can do the thing that you need to do, but you can't actually take care of the person, your outcomes will tell us that that's the case, and including things like people will complain because they've come for care and you've not been able to meet that need.
The Health Practitioners Competency Act, by which all of these professions are governed, require each of the registration boards, the regulatory authorities, to have a cultural competency component that requires them to develop a relationship with Māori. So that's at the regulatory authority and at a practitioner level, we're required to be culturally competent.
And so that flows through not just into things like standards that doctors and nurses and other regulated professions have to meet. It also flows through into requirements for their continuing medical education, or professional development, that forms one of the sets of things that they need to do on an ongoing basis. So we're both involved in regulatory authorities, and I've certainly in my time with one seen a real emphasis being placed on using the regulatory levers to insist on cultural competency and cultural safety.
I think as well that people who make the complaint are actively involved in the investigation, and so that's probably a safety net that if there were some cultural issues, they would show up in the engagement with health and disability. It's not done around in that part of it. I'm 90% sure.
90%.
So I think in answer to your question further on, because the Act was changed in the last 12 months, and now there's going to be an evaluation of how each regulatory body puts that into practice, I think that's actually going to be something that we'll be looking at in the next months and years ahead, is how are we going to monitor cultural competency in things in the professions and also the complaints coming through. Because from my perspective at the moment, it's very difficult to do that, but now you can hang on an act.
Is there a regulatory framework for cultural competency that applies?
Regulatory, yes. But through the regulatory authority.
Yeah. But then my understanding is that it's down to those regulatory authorities to set what they think.
Yes.
But there isn't overarch. So say the occupational therapy board and the physio board, they've got their own. It looks just about the same, but it's not exactly the same. It's not exactly consistent. And just to touch back on the outcome perspective, we don't have direct measures currently, but we do have the patients and the final story. We do have the actual, if people are aggrieved, they tell us, and thank goodness for that. But it's about what we do with it. At the end of the day, you need to be able to use those levers and actually change things. Otherwise, you're going to complain against the one.
I suppose I'm just following up on all the work that was done under Mahiatsu and the outcomes-based framework that they've developed and pushed through, and then how does that apply across all of the services? I guess that's where my question, why I'm thinking around how do we lift that performance if it's required to do so. I'm not saying it is or isn't, I'm just saying but that's part of it. So that's where my question comes from, in terms of established practice already in place at the moment. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I do just want to say it really heartens me to hear you guys as clinicians and managers talk about systems change, and that the solution isn't just training and all of that other stuff. It's okay, so how, like, what is it to, how was it that you do the thing finally that has created kind of dysfunction then? I really applaud that thinking, and I'm really glad to hear that. I just want to give you that. Thank you.
Who complains the most? Do you hear the data?
I guess my response to that, unfortunately, the people that complain
Karen again.
aren't always representative. I think there are things that we don't know about that happen that we should know about, but a complaints process isn't the be all and end all, because you've got people that are worried about missing out on future care. Yes. You've got a very small community that could feel vulnerable if they complain, what about next time, what about me and mine going forward? I think the solution is partly, the check and balance, but it's also actually just changing and doing a better job in the first instance so that we don't have to go through that process. But yes, I don't think that complaints necessarily reflect the true magnitude of what's out there. So to be mindful that we need to do it better.
And I actually quite linked to health literacy. Those who are more health literate tend
to absolutely.
But I think I feel reassured that, and I'm sure this is still the case, Jim, is that within the organisation we have a process that encourages people to, if they have a complaint, encourage it. It doesn't have to be in writing, it can be face-to-face, and we as staff and managers are set up to receive complaints in any shape or form. And I think that's why I feel reassured that, while health literacy, you're right, is a problem, I know that we bend over backwards to get people to have access to a complaints process that they're comfortable with.
Sure, but I would stress that our first thought is not to, get into the, we're very happy and we, value people providing that kind of feedback. But, we are more set up to try and intervene at the very first, and I think from a cultural component, our Pākeke working within services are really there. I mean, one of the reasons they're there is to be able to work very closely with whānau and Tūroro right at the interface point. For two reasons. One is that they are most often able to have the kinds of conversations with people at that interface point with clinical services and understand, a different dimension and act as a way of getting that message across, and also to coach. The other thing, to coach our clinical staff on how to approach these things and how to be more effective. They're very much part of the team, and so they've got that dual role of an intermediary and a coach. Yeah.
And following on from what Jim was just saying about within the environment of clinical services, are you confident there's sort of an ethos of continuous improvement within the people that are working with our patients as well? That's because that means that your improvement's coming not only because you have to, because there is a complaint, but because you want to.
I think we don't get into healthcare as a rule to get a paycheck. I think we are generally across the board here to care for people. But I mean, there's variation. We are human at the end of the day. Everybody, we need to, as an organisation, meet people where they are at, as in staff, and to say that, more of the same isn't good enough, and that we do need to get better. But it also needs to be, once again, a system approach to that. For me, it starts with things like onboarding. when we get to Tairāwhiti and we have to learn the Tairāwhiti way, we need to have a very strong response in that space. I came here 4 years ago and I'd gone to, worked in different DHPs, and generally I thought about 6 months, that's about a settle in time. Probably 18 months later, I was still thinking, there's just a lot of stuff here I don't understand. And I do think some of that has been addressed in the last couple of years, but when it comes to setting the tone that this is the Tairāwhiti way, that has a culturally appropriate response, because culture is fluid. I come from Waitemata, and I thought that the competency framework there was good, but I also knew that it's going to be different when I get here. So my response in that sense is to say that yes, clinicians at their core want to be better, but we need to give them the tools to get better and mandate those and make it consistent.
Sure. I think it's cool.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other?
Only to note, I guess, that when you look at the table of Tairāwhiti's complaints of 100,000 discharged in the last 5 years, it has been tracking lower. And so, and we're on the average feedback, so, I guess that's good to know.
And I think, that just the whole context of this must be about improvement and learning. That's the whole purpose of it.
Aye.
Thank you both very much. Thank you. Okay, so I think now what we will do is move to item 7.3.
Yes, Jerry is just over there. He's just coming in the room.
Jerry.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can share some stuff with you if you want. Just talk. I usually talk a lot of rubbish.
This way would be to email it. I'll put it on here and sorry.
I was trying to choke you, Jim.
Put it on there and share it on the screen.
Could we just share? Oh, just get it.
Yeah, because we've got it on there, so we can share it on the screen.
Okay, sorry, I was just finding the right paperwork. So, welcome, thank you for joining us. Okay, we're going to pass over to you. We have paper in front of us, but we'll pass over to you initially to present what you're and then we'll have a discussion as board.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just introduce Jerry, because people around the table may not know him, and he may not know everybody here. So Jerry Devlin is a cardiologist in the Department of Cardiology here at Hauora.
I'm still waiting, Jeff. I'm still waiting.
Well, I've got something for you. But anyway, so Jerry, how long have you been working for now? About
almost 2 years.
2 years.
September.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been here nearly 20 years. And if somebody had said to me 20 years ago is when I first came here that the future of Tairāwhiti would be a department of cardiology and a burgeoning department of cardiology with a whole team of cardiologists and specialist cardiac nurses and even a nurse practitioner in cardiology, I probably would have thought, not likely. But here we are. And I know that Jerry's going to talk a lot about that. And a lot of that is, of course, has been through his leadership. Hand over. But do we quick round the table so Jerry knows who he's talking to?
Hi.
Tony Robinson.
Sandra Cookner. Hi, Jerry. Josh Fuddinger, elected member.
Kia ora, Jerry Meriden. Kia ora, Jerry Nā Raihania.
Kia ora, Heather Robertson.
Kia ora, Jerry Hiki Pihima dietitian.
Kia ora, Kim Gardner.
Kia ora, Amy Ray.
Andy Cranston.
Kia ora. So you may not know, where I've come from. So to introduce myself a little bit. So I'm from Ireland. I came to New Zealand long time ago. Worked in Waikato for many years, and was responsible for the development of cardiac services for several years in Waikato. And Judy and myself, we decided once our youngest had left school, we wanted a different challenge, and I've been coming here for 10 years doing visiting clinics, helping provide visiting services from Waikato, and I'm passionate about equity, and I think the things aligned at that stage. Jim mentioned Tairāwhiti, we're looking at developing cardiac services. We were looking for a different challenge. I think things that I'll share some information which will highlight a little bit of where we've come with cardiac services in our region. We've got challenges still ahead, obviously, but we're certainly at a better place than we were 2 years ago in cardiac services. But I think what you asked me to speak to begin with was the public reporting of outcomes of people presenting with heart attacks in New Zealand. I'm partially responsible, wearing a different hat for that than in the public domain. We believe public reporting is important, and public reporting of outcomes of health, heart health, whatever type of health, in a way that the public can understand what's going on. So not me sitting talking about the number of people that had X done by a certain way. It needs to be important that people can understand what that means to them. In our own region, for example, we'll come to what's on the report in a second. Most people don't know that if you get a heart attack here, you're not treated by getting a stent put in. That's not available in rural New Zealand. It's just not. And it never will be.
Never say never, Jerry.
Yeah, true. But I understand that in health, and I make decisions about where I live. Cognizant of those issues. I think it's important New Zealanders understand what's available locally, what we can improve locally, but also the expectation is with our tertiary services, everybody gets access to health in a timely manner that's appropriate and at the same level, with some of those caveats around the acute care. So this is the registry that we've been involved with for almost 10 years now, and this is the All New Zealand Acute Coronary Syndrome Quality Improvement, and that's the key bit in this. This is just not about collecting data for the sake of collecting data. Doctors are very good at collecting data. In fact, doctors are very good at getting other people to collect data and then they publish the data. But the quality improvement is really important in this, and we've demonstrated over the last 10 years quality improvement in acute coronary syndrome. Next slide. So if we look at here, so when you come in with acute coronary syndrome or a suspected heart attack, we know that getting on and performing a dye test in people we identify at high risk is appropriate. And what we see here is next slide. Over 10 years, since 2006, we've increased that by about 22%. So that's huge around the country. Next slide. What we also see is the number of people coming in with heart attacks is actually decreasing in New Zealand. I'll draw your attention to this. We still have issues with equity, but everybody is getting better, but we've still got issues with equity that we need to address. So next slide. So that's down about 27%, and that's great, and that's by lots of people at the coalface working very, very hard to make this happen. But what also has made this happen is reporting, and the fact that we've got to report some of these targets to the ministry, and people around this table will know the importance of the ministerial stick to make things happen at a DHB level, and it's been really important to help us achieve some of these targets. With ANZAC QI being the vehicle we can collect the data as part of the normal workflow in cath labs and coronary care units and hospitals, such as our own hospital as well. So next slide.
Sorry, Jerry. Will you take questions?
Yeah.
So I just can't let it grab. We'll just go back one slide. I just can't let it grab and ask why we flattened out on Maori in that graph from 2016.
This is the reduction in admissions?
Yeah.
but more so even with Pacifica, Chairman, that it's come down. Yeah. And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. And we've discussed, the ANZAC's QI governance and why that's happening. But there's still work to do.
Because up until 2015, the trajectory there was for Māori to, completely eliminate an equity gap within about 2 or 3 years. But no, something's happened.
So Jerry, which colours are the Māori ones?
Colour Māori is red in this one. So people will always come in with acute coronary syndromes. I mean, we will always see people coming in with heart attacks, and about 50% of the people that we see coming in with an acute coronary syndrome are people that have had a previous heart attack. So we will never see this way down here, but this needs to come down to here. You're right. So we need to work harder, Jim, to understand what those barriers actually are.
Well, I mean, without prolonging the discussion, I'm wondering if we got better at actually encouraging people to come out of the community with their ACS symptoms and actually get treatment. So maybe that's why it's gone back up a bit, because we've actually got more people coming out of the woodwork, so to speak, with ACS, and maybe we're catching people at an earlier stage. So, you're more of an expert than I would be on that, as to whether that's better than
Was that the first year we had
it might be this is a national stat. So anyway, keep moving. Sorry.
But, and again, this just emphasises exactly what you're saying. So when we see difference, this is national reporting, but ANZAC QI allows us to go into regional variation in care, and that's really important. So I'm not going to sort out the problems in Tairāwhiti, but our DHB needs to be aware of the problems in our DHB that we can address. So I think what we're looking at here is medication. So these are the medications people are sent home on after a heart attack. And green is good, and purple is not good. And as you can see, there is variation in care still. And we need to ask the questions at a local level, exactly what you're asking. What's going on? What can we do to address this? I don't want to discuss why. It's not straightforward, but this is what enables us to do, and we need to keep asking these questions. We're actually doing better here than we were. Yeah, next slide. One of the ways that we've talked about, and the ombudsman, Ron Patterson, when he was the ombudsman, I struggle with that word. 10 years ago, we need public reporting of health data in a meaningful way. So we've been one of the first cabs off the rank with this, with heart health, using the ANZAC QI database to provide public reports. What's really important about public reporting is that you've got buy-in from the clinicians. So clinicians understand the ANZAC QI data. They trust the ANZAC QI data. There's data collected in lots of other ways. Health Roundtable, I will mention, that clinicians do not trust. We do not trust where that data comes from, how it's generated, but we trust this data. So therefore, we propose this to the Cardiac Society, to the ANZAC QI, and working with Hitch, Health Quality and Safety, we came up with using the ANZAC QI to put this in a patient journey, if you will, with suspected heart attacks all the way through to getting your heart attack treated to what the aftercare of that heart attack looked like. And as you can see, there is variation. If you go to the next slide. So this is our own DHB, and this is of interest to this group. This bit here, I find this difficult. I think there's a lot of variation with this around the country. This is so, how quickly do you call for help when you have a suspected heart attack? Maybe we all have got better messaging out in rural Tairāwhiti about people not staying at home. But this is something that we need to keep refocusing on. It's one of the, what we've done. So I'm also medical director of the Heart Foundation. It's one of the things that we've done with the Heart Foundation, public awareness campaigns around chest discomfort, not staying at home, you dial 111. And we need to keep doing this. So to the treatment, how fast do you get your treatment? And as people around the table will know, the DHB has been working with St. John's, with the cardiac networks, to bring the treatment to the patients. So if you have a heart attack up the coast, you're not necessarily going to be transferred here to get the clot busting medicine. You're going to get the clot busting medicine delivered up the coast by St. John's, and then transferred not here, but to Waikato. And why not here? Well, 1 in 3 people will need to go to get their artery opened up acutely. There's no point in them coming and sitting here. That's not beneficial to me as that patient. So we're transferring people out, and we will see this indicator move. And a couple of these indicators, these ones here. So how quickly do you get your dye test? How's your dye test done? That's then dependent on the tertiary center. So this is stuff that Waikato is determinant for us. So how many people get their angiogram done within 3 days? It's been a national target for a number of years. Whether they do it from the arm, it's much safer to do it from the arm and the leg today. We tend to train our registrar to do these things from the arm today. How many people get their heart muscle checked before they go home after a heart attack? Why that's important is it guides us in the medications. So if your heart muscle is not normal, we will use 5 medications. If it's normal, maybe 4 medications. And that's where the next indicator comes from. That's the one that we're looking at as well as aftercare. And this consistently around the country, we do not do well at. So we look at people at 12 months after been admitted with a heart attack, only 60 to 70% of them are on 3 recommended pills, let alone 4 or 5. And we all do this consistently poorly around the country. What we don't know that happens, so we collect all this data in hospital. We've got pretty good at collecting data in hospital. We don't know what happens when someone's discharged to 12 months. We can collect data from national dispensing, prescribing, but what's going on in primary care? We're not talking to each other around how we improve the quality of care. Huge challenge, huge challenge. We've got to do better with that.
So Jerry, if you were looking at the angiography x-rays, that one right down the bottom, so who would we see about that? Is that a Waikato hospital, DHB?
Yeah, absolutely. It is, and we're in their ear all the time about this. This is part of the reporting that we see on a regular basis. I'm in Jim's ear all the time about this as well.
It's true.
It just doesn't make sense, you know, we put all this time and effort into getting them over there quickly.
Yeah.
Promoting, you know, ring, hello, and it's right down the bottom.
Well, it's significantly lower than everyone else, but we've got the highest reporting, the fastest reporting rate.
Yeah.
Something's wrong.
Yeah, still.
So what's also happened so this indicator, the target is 3 days nationally. The whole country slipped back by about half a day in the last 6 months. Now, COVID possibly to blame a little bit for it, but COVID's not the full answer. But don't forget also that a lot of these big centres were getting ready for COVID, and that's a huge drain on resources, you know. So when we were speaking to Waikato about 6 weeks before COVID, they were saying, well, can you try and do things slightly differently at the moment? But again, potential second wave of COVID, we need to be aware that there's other things going on. People still get heart disease. We're seeing lots of reports coming out from overseas. People that have got COVID overseas now presenting with heart failure because they didn't come to hospital. We still want our messaging to be the same. You know, we do not, and we work pretty hard with that to get the messaging the same. You've got chest discomfort, don't stay at home.
I think we should we can put the dot on there for last month, 70%, so we're right on the red line there for last month. But yeah, month by month, we think we're getting improvement, and then it does.
Yeah, and I'm not answering it from the other end, but small numbers, and our numbers are small compared to Waikato, for example. 1 or 2 people for us make a big difference how we swing with this, and that's I'm not making excuses. But
seems like there's sort of quite a lot in here about liaison and communication between primary, us and tertiary.
Yeah. So and again, that's something that we've worked harder to do here, is to join those dots up between primary and secondary. Tertiary, we historically we've had Tairāwhiti's had good relationships with tertiary. It's been a little bit more complex in the last, and I'm not telling you guys stuff that you haven't discussed. I mean, the interface of Waikato DHB is difficult now for lots of reasons, and that's from the top down. But again, we're working with it. We're trying to work as a team.
At the other end, is there a simple solution to obviously people getting their medication and closing that loop so that people get their ongoing care? Is there a keep it simple solution or not?
I think it's continuity. I think it's making sure that that we're because don't forget that hospital care is a small part of someone's care with heart disease. Heart disease doesn't go away. Even if we put a stent in, you've still got heart disease. And this is all around primary care. It's about collecting data and understanding the data. I think it might sound a little bit simplistic, but if we look at CVD risk assessment, which is it's one of the things that we're actually doing a lot of focus on, cardiovascular disease risk assessment. And over risk assessment, I want to know when you risk assess someone, how you're managing that risk.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have to collect data and not be afraid to collect data. Some PHOs do not want to collect data. Not here. Our PHOs are actually very keen to collect data, but Canterbury, for example, have conversations with Pegasus and Canterbury. They don't believe that you need, you have a conversation with someone about their risk, and that's it. It stops there.
Yeah, I mean, as a layperson, you sort of think it's a system where you can have a red flag go up when medications are not collected.
Those
I mean, you can't be in their home busy making them take their pills, but you can.
So what you're talking about, decision support tools in primary care, and they're there. They're there already. Yeah.
Sorry, Jerry, in the short time I've been on this board, because we always hear about the mechanisms that are here in our health system in this tertiary space. I mean, I'm always wondering, is it working for the best for our, are we advocating hard enough for the care of our people? Because when you transfer over to another hospital, a whole lot more anxiety, a whole lot more kind of, I have to go to Waikato myself. But it's just, are we seeing that mechanism be the best? Or should we be advocating for this to become tertiary? I know it's about costs, money, all of those things, but is this system working? I know we've reviewed some of it, but...
how much can I say?
Well, just remember, it's a live stream.
Yeah.
So you're talking to the population, not a large number, but it's recorded as well. So, yeah.
I guess our confidence in the current tertiary provider providing cardiac services is at an all-time low, and that's what we would say. So we are actively looking at what we can do differently here, and we're actually doing a lot of things. If I can just go on to a couple of, I just want to finish on that up. But public reporting. Again, another potential benefit of public reporting is it improves care. So there's published data to say that it improves care as well. So it's not just because the ombudsman says it's what we should do and because it's the right thing to do, but by us discussing this data out in the public domain, it improves care as well. So we're all conscious we've got to lift our game as well as health providers. So I just want to talk a little bit about what we're doing. And I've changed my language over the last 2-3 years. I talk about health instead of disease. I try to talk about health instead of disease. The Heart Foundation now talk about health instead of disease, and that's great, and it's refreshing to see. But I'm not going to label these stats. You guys know these stats. We've got huge issues with equity and cardiovascular outcomes. So cardiovascular is heart disease and stroke for Maori and Pacific. Our vision, the cardiac communities and the CHB's vision, is a heart-healthy Tairāwhiti. And what's really important around cardiovascular health is what we do to prevent heart disease also prevents stroke. So we're maintaining, people's overall cardiovascular health. And we forget that. We forget that it's huge benefits around treating someone's blood pressure. It's not just about reducing stroke, it reduces heart attacks, treating someone's cholesterol, stopping someone smoking, also reduces their risk of stroke. So that's our team. That's the team that I work with. And these probably are the three most important people that I work with. That's our nursing staff. They've been here for as long as I've been here, coming 10 years doing clinics here. And Tracy's she's just qualified as a nurse practitioner. And I think nurse practitioners, our nursing staff, they are the future. They are the way to get sustainability of cardiac services to help support the heart health of our community. We've now got 3 cardiologists. Bob is coming, I think he's signed on in January as a general physician. He will help out with some of the cardiac clinics. He's trained as a cardiologist. We're now able to do pacemaker checks locally. Someone's got a defibrillator, we can check that. And this guy, Neil's come to us from India via Saudi, and he is superb. He's superb. Our challenge is keeping someone like him. So what we've done to try to support him is we've reached out to Tairāwhiti. So he goes across to the Bay of Plenty, he helps out in their cath lab to put pacemakers in, to put devices in, and he loves it. But he's committed here. So that's great. So this photo was taken around just after COVID because we were pretty proactive with people that we know during COVID. So people with heart failure, we wanted to make sure they were doing okay. So we reached out, we made contact with phone, some Skype calls to some of our, our heart whānau. And what we also were able to achieve is getting some blood pressure monitors. And I don't know where you got those, was it the COVID fund? But we got blood pressure monitors to allow us.
Not going into too much detail.
to help us maximize people's medications to help keep them well in the community. So that was a great piece of work working with the community to keep our people well in the community with heart disease. Next. So that's our activity over the last couple of years. As you can see, we are a bit of a machine in clinic. We are pumping people through our clinics. So we saw in 2018, 1,500 people. We're now seeing just under 3,000 people a year in the clinics. Our clinic model, we're again having discussions about moving our clinics out of the DHB and trying to do more work up the coast. It was fair to say when Doug was there, we had quite a lot of support for that. We've been speaking to Bobby again about trying to do that. We're hopeful that we'll get on and do that on a regular basis from September. We can't do this alone. Primary care and working across the continuum is important. And part of my role is actually to help enable that. It's part of my time is to allow me to build these relationships, and relations are pretty important. And again, working with other bodies such as St. John's, it's easy for us to work with the Heart Foundation at the moment. It may not always be. It's easy at the moment. And it's a package, and it's around heart health, not heart disease. But what we've been able to do with development of services in-house, and you may or may not know, we've got a very active CT program here where we can look at someone's heart arteries with a CT scanner. CTs can tell me if someone's got heart disease, yes or no. So they're that good. So for us, it's about putting the right person in the right place at the right time But, you know, to the interface with the tertiary centre, they love it because we're not sending people across who don't necessarily need an angiogram. We're able to say, hey, well, Mr. Smith's actually got a narrowing down here, he needs a stent. We get it right more often than not, and they just get on the plan to put a stent in. It makes their lists at time much more predictable.
Do you sort of explain what that picture is?
Yeah, so this is the main blood vessel coming out of the heart. That's the aorta. The heart's got 3 coronary arteries, one on the right and one on the left, divided into 2 branches, one down the front called the LAD and one around the back called the circumflex. So 3 main arteries. This is the one here, that's State Highway 1. And we can see blockages in any of these arteries. You know, plaque develops and builds up. The other great thing about CT is that it can show early disease. So it can show something that I wouldn't see in a conventional angiogram. Why that's important, it actually enables a better conversation with someone about their medications, about how important it is to stop smoking. If you say, well, you've got a little bit of silt building up in your artery already, you really gotta do something to prevent this getting blocked in 5 years' time. And there's literature to say that actually improves people's buy-in to managing their own heart health. Yep.
Sorry, can I just pick up on that point if I could? Are you suggesting the indications are that everyone should have a CT to confirm where their State Highway 1 or 2 or 3 are at? Irrespective of chest.
Really good question. So how we risk assess someone's risk of potential having risk of heart disease and stroke is all this population-based risk assessment, these little tools that we all put people's, you know. This is around personalised risk assessment. So our threshold for this, I'm just going to show you some information in a second, but our threshold for this is actually pretty low. So we are looking at someone who would be assessed potentially at moderate to high risk using those population-based equations. And we're saying, oh, let's do a CT. We had an application to the Heart Foundation for funding to try and let us look at this in a larger population. We didn't get funding. But we've applied to HRC for some funding to look at this as well. But yeah, I think it's a no-brainer, particularly if you're looking at a community.
Yes.
It's got a higher risk. Let's identify people to get on, you know, make an impact sooner to maintain heart health.
Very good.
So we've just looked at our own use of CT, and this was meant to be presented at the Cardiac Society. It's been published but not presented, obviously, because the meeting didn't take place. Yeah, next slide. But if we look at the CTs that we did over a 12-month period, just over a 12-month period, we did 158 patients. I'd argue it should be more Maori, not less Maori. That doesn't fully reflect our population. 1 in 3 has some degree of silting up of the arteries. So 1 in 3 people would be having that conversation around, maybe you need to take a cholesterol medication, maybe you need to stop smoking, you know. But also, of the numbers that we were sending across were much less than we would have sent across previously. And what's really important is the conventional way we would assess, and these are people coming in with chest pain. Conventional way we would see somebody coming in with chest pain, stick them on a treadmill. The treadmill is positive, we'd send them across the Waikato for an angiogram, dye test. So we're doing almost 50% less treadmill tests because we've actually got this available to us. And we are continuing to evolve our program. So currently we're doing 5 to 6 CTs a week. Put that in perspective, Waikato are doing about 3 CTs a week currently. We're probably one of the most active CT programs per head of population in the country. And we're very keen to explore a funding committee and new ways to expand our CT program.
Jerry, given what you just described to us, would that then have an effect on the fact that people from Tairāwhiti are not getting an angiogram within 3 days? Because
this is for outpatients. So the other one I showed you is for people that come in with a heart attack. So no, But there's another trial, it's interesting. So again, one way potentially of bringing that number, that 3-day number, achieving that in a better way is to use CT. We do not have a lot of information on the benefits of CT in that acute population, but we're hoping, again, we're part of the HRC trial to actually start assessing CT in the acute management of someone with a heart attack. So again, I'll stop when you want me to, but
it's hard to share the front of the meeting.
I'm almost finished. So that's what we conclude. Positive impact from CT. It's changed how we manage people with chest pain. I think it's got lots of potential. I know there are other avenues we're very keen to look at exploring. So heart failure, we know that heart failure is much, much more common in our population. And they're dreadful statistics. They're dreadful statistics. Higher hospitalizations, higher mortality, and tends to begin earlier and they die earlier. This is Maori and Pacific. Okay, so really important disease we need to. So we're able to manage this better. We've got a new drug available to us. Pharmac funded it about 18 months ago, and we've looked at our use of this. And Kristen did present this. It was a virtual meeting because she was the finalist for the Nurse Affiliate Prize. So we looked at our review of this medication. So 73% of our patients are Maori. I would expect it to be at least that because that's the population we tend to see with heart failure. Next slide. Our experience was positive using the nurse-led heart failure service. So this is Christian, been involved actively, proactively with these patients to up-titrate their medications, establish them on their medications. And we haven't followed up lots of people to date, but heart muscle function improved in 40% of people we'd followed up, and people felt better. So again, this drug has changed our ability to treat heart failure. We are very active about identifying people to go on this drug. And again, now I showed you data per head of population from other DHBs, we're way up there. We are way up there. And that's our team doing this, local people doing this. So research, we've now, as of about 3 months ago, we've now got a local cardiology research team together. I've got 2 nurses that help myself and the other team, they weren't on that photo, unfortunately. This did not get funded. So any thoughts on the funding? We can put our hands up.
Is that the CTCA?
That's the one where we've been working with Patrick McCabe and Nick Wright to look at plant-based diet.
Which I thought you pointed to the burden of silent coronary disease didn't get funded.
No, it didn't, but that's part of that whole program there. There's a couple of these trials here are New Zealand trials where we're going to look at people coming in with heart attacks and are there bad genes that predispose you to having a worse outcome with a heart attack? We're looking at, can we optimize someone's care after a heart attack by using blood tests as biomarkers to improve care? And that they're trials that we've been invited to participate in. We've just started this trial here where we're looking at iron. So people with heart failure, can we make them feel better and improve the heart muscle function? This is a new trial looking at a polypill. See if we can improve people's blood pressure. So 1 pill to treat blood pressure, cholesterol, and I've got a teleconference at 12:30 to get us on board with this trial.
So Jerry, in those research opportunities, will you be oversampling for Māori?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm engaging up the coast, engaging with everybody really to do that. I'm working this trial specifically. I'm very keen to work with Tuna, with Patrick, and anybody else to identify people. This is more community-based.
She kind of asked some of the question I wanted to ask. You showed the stats for Māori before. In your research, are you going to be specifically looking at why are the rates higher for Māori? What causes?
Yeah. So these 2 trials here, Menzax in particular, Menzax, I was involved in Menzax and Waikato, and we've got a large Māori population already in Menzax. So yes, the answer is that the issue is getting enough Māori people in to answer those questions in the trial, and that's really important that communities such as ours are involved in these trials. You know, we've got large Māori communities. If you don't have enough people, then people, they question the applicability of the results of the trial then to Maori and Pacific, for example. And we had issues with this up the coast, we up the coast, we said, well, we're trying to, and this is practice, this is assessing implementation of, a different way of doing things. And it's around, chest pain, we present with chest pain, we put a structure around it, including blood tests. And part of the feedback, well, where is the data that this pathway actually works for Maori? My thoughts on that, where's the data that the way you're doing it currently works for Maori? Because I don't think it's working. So again, we've got to, do things, but do them with a little bit of science behind what we're doing. But including people in the community is really important.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I'm always interested in the narrative of the impacts of our stories. And we're going through some dialogue in multiple spaces about colonisation and the impacts on Māori. So I guess for me, I'm interested to know in our investigations what iterations of changes have gotten better for Māori. What have they been around? So it's heartening to hear you speak of unpacking.
So the other thing I didn't show work that Tracy's done as part of her thesis submission for her nurse practitioner is around using pictograms and telling stories around chest pain.
Yeah.
Really powerful stuff, it's really powerful stuff.
Your Matai column's clear.
Oh, well, Matai's, it's opportunities for us. I just the building looks great. Matai, I'm pretty clear. I'm on the board Matai as well. But Matai will not fly on brain research alone. It will not fly. So we need to build a heart health portfolio around that.
Great.
There's lots of different ideas. And lots of people have got lots of ideas as well.
Well, kia ora, thank you so much. Look, it's been great, but I'm going to have to move us on because we've got less than an hour left in our meeting. I do want to thank you very much for coming in and talking with us. And for me, it's like this meeting as a whole, it's been really heartening hearing about the sophistication of some of our treatment options and clinical equipment, and that our clinicians are actually taking themselves out to the people rather than waiting for the people to come to them. So, we heard about ophthalmology taking themselves up the coast and the success of that, and I was really heartened to hear that cardiology is also looking to do that, and that we've got a cardiology department, So that's fantastic. So thank you very much. So unless there's any other really pressing questions from anyone, we will move on. Thank you very much for attending.
Great presentation.
Yeah. We're just going to carry on. We do have a lunch break scheduled, but I think we're just going to actually carry on. So I'm going to move us back to item 7.2, which is around page 6. And it's our planned care improvement. Yeah. So Jim, is this passing over to you?
Yes, it can be passing over to me, although to some extent we've already talked about this.
Yep.
So it's really just the sort of formalised part of the conversations that we've already had, and in writing for you around what we're up to around planned care improvement, just really the same messages around the fact that we have a plan. We know what we're wanting to achieve. We submitted that plan to the Ministry of Health. The good thing about is the combination of having a plan and then there's money behind it. Yeah. So we know that government's put up $280 million over the next 3 years. $50 million of that is for capital. The other $230 million is for operating expenditure over 3 years to really rip into the backlog that is there, not just COVID related, but the year before last, we had a lot of lost time with industrial action in particular, which got us behind. So our estimate of that is around $900,000 per annum. The ministry's a little bit coy about that because that's just purely a population-based assessment of that, and they may have different ideas about how that might be distributed depending on how far behind district health boards are. It would be unfortunate if those that were less behind were penalised in getting help to keep moving forward, but we'll keep our keep our foot to the accelerator on that. So just one more thing to say that this is just a first for you, just to give you, I mean, we talked last meeting about let's have some more detail around what's happening. There's only 2 graphs in there. We'll be able to provide you with some more graphs going forward. So you can get I think it's absolutely right. And I'm tracking it. You want to track it. The whole population wants to track what's happening about this, and certainly the Minister of Health does as well.
Fantastic. So this is an information item responding to our previous request. So what I'm quite keen to do is to finish our public session before we have a wee. So unless there's any questions.
No questions. Just thank you. Thank you, Jim. You know, I was quite incessant in regards to the information here, and I really appreciate it. Really like the quantum part and the next steps part. You know, yeah, really well built up paper. Thank you so much.
Good. So at item, I can't remember what it is, but it's our annual plan.
Page 76.
Item 8.1. So we've had a couple of sessions on the annual plan, and Jim has been talking to me on discussions with the ministry on the way through. So this is a decision item really to approve. Jim, I'll leave it to you to highlight how changes and feedback from the board have been incorporated and exactly where we're at with the ministry now. Suffice to say, we've ended up not quite exactly where we wanted, but better than we thought we would.
Yes. So you know the story so far in terms of our annual plan for 2021. You've seen it 3 times now, and thank you to the feedback that we've received along the way, and we've incorporated that into the version that you have there. The version that you have there in the paper isn't actually perfect yet. There's a couple of areas that still need to be sorted out. There needs to be a bit of a run through just to make sure we've got all of the Maori right within it. And I noticed that Tairāwhiti had infected our and double vowels had snuck their way into that, so we have to fix that. Those sorts of things. The other things that are highlighted in that cover paper there, which you've all read, so suffice to say that there were a number of areas, then you've seen in there the table of the feedback that we got from the ministry around things we had to improve. Our savings plans, unsurprisingly, there's a big emphasis around what we're doing around that, so there's quite a bit more detail put in there in terms of in-year gains for 2021 and then out-year 21-22. You will see there that our savings plans are around improvement of care for our population. So they're not just about where can we chop money out, they're actually saying how can we do that in a smart way that actually brings a benefit for our population. So how we are more effective and efficient with our services gives better services for people and enables us to save money. And we've had a conversation already this morning around transitioning out of outsourced to insourced personnel as a good example of that. And also that we also had to, in terms of service change, include a section in there around FTE numbers. There's a big focus from the ministry, I would say, mostly around FTEs in DHBs. FTEs in DHBs have grown substantially in the last couple of years. Unsurprising to me when we've needed to be more effective and have more staff on the ground to deal, and we've been implementing programs like key capacity demand management, but we had to write a section there that justifies our FTE growth that we've planned for the year. We've actually planned for less than a 20 FTE increase, but you know I've put in that section that explains 20 FTEs just, and that, as Craig says this morning, we've hit the nail on the head for that one for the ministry, so that's good. And then the other area there is around financial. So we, the last time we submitted a budget that was with a $6 million deficit, we had conversations at the table around here that did include a degree of ability to not only address our deficit and more than and halve it in that respect, but also to look at investing at some of our ideas and ways of which we think we can work with our community to improve our health outcomes and all across the day-to-day. You've been hearing a lot about those things. And we have been able to negotiate within the Ministry of Health to retain some of that additional funding that the government has put in. Remember, world record total funding in health this year for DHBs and for us. And so we've been able to retain some of that for investment. And we had to then put in a section within the plan that is detailing about how we would go about doing that. So that's that section on the bottom of page 78. And it does lead us to a planned deficit for this coming year of $4 million. So that is taking us down by $8 million on the prior year, roughly. So that will be an interesting thing for us. Last year we had a few investment areas, but this is a much larger area. And also we haven't been too specific about exactly what we're wanting to do, because we do think from our experience, is that there are ideas that we need to really, really capture from those people on the ground about some things that might work best, and we don't want to presuppose those. So that's it. It's there. If you take any questions on it, we really would like you to approve that now, subject to two things. One is that there's a table in there around the financials that wasn't able to be updated, so that needs to be done. We need to check it, word check it again, and all going well, if you approve it, it will go to the ministry this week, and it will be in the first tranche of plans that the minister will be signing by about the middle of August.
So to my mind, we've had this on our table a number of times and provided feedback. Possibly the key new issue in here for the board is that the $6 million deficit that we sought has been brought back to a $4 million deficit. Just from the nature of discussions across Te Manawa and with other chairs, is this is still a good position for us. Really. So, those are the bits I want to pop on the table, and if there's any views that anyone would like to express on this.
Only one. I absolutely support the plan going forward. It's fantastic. Really interested in the HNA and how Maori fares throughout it.
So there's a paper coming up on there, on the agenda as well. Can I just say that the 4 is really 6? Unusual, isn't it? That two different numbers are actually the same, but it's, the 6 was if we invested for 12 months, the 4 is if we invest for 6 months, and we just know we're not going to be, it's already, heading towards the end of July. So, so that's okay.
Okay, so I'm taking that as the board supports finishing this for go in front of the minister for approval. And
just on page 102, I don't know why, but sentence that says under achieving equity, 4th bullet point, 4 key ingredients to achieve equity: recognising a large proportion of the population lead privileged lives. I just have difficulty reconciling that statement with.
We've had that discussion and at the last time, so that just needs to be captured.
Do you want us just to remove that sentence?
Yeah, because I actually can't link it with the health outcomes. I mean, privileged lives has got a whole lot of other connotations. If it was a large portion or a significant proportion struggle to access health outcomes, so that's
language tied to equity. It's language tied to equity.
Yeah, but we had that discussion about it being potentially a bit inflammatory. Yeah. Okay.
Kia ora. Other than that, perfect. So happy with the quick response back from the MOH, which was boxing on team.
So this will be a very new thing, will it not, Jim, to have a annual plan approved in August?
Well, it's a newish thing. It's cut 6 months off the trajectory from last year, and that means we have 6 months more to be able to concentrate on delivering on this, rather than toing and froing further with the ministry about this. And also, of course, we're going to have to be starting on the 2021-22 plan reasonably soon as well. So we don't, so we've had the 2 processes running in parallel for some time. So that's another benefit.
Okay. So just to clarify on that last bullet point, I don't want to belabor it. That's recognising that putting equity into place will have a challenge from a previous majority view.
Yeah,
That's
that
what
might,
it's-
I mean, the discussion we had last time though was to try to get past this perception that by pursuing equity, we're taking things away from other people.
Yeah, but the dot point is actually around the fact that much of the way in which the health system is designed and operate is for people to be able to access, because they are actually able to access it. It's designed around and they have the ability to access it. So equity is around about how do we redesign it in a way that other people are able to access just as easily as the people sitting around this table. Yep.
Well, we'll leave that wordsmithing.
Yeah, leave it with wordsmith, yeah.
Okay, so we are saying yes, that can go forward to the minister. Our next item at 8.2, I think it is a procurement item for replacement of an obsolete machine in radiology that, from my read, is approved in our CapEx agreed plan. So I'm passing this one to Craig. Is this you?
Yeah, just agree, I reckon.
Agree?
Yeah, right, we don't need.
All the
no
business
problem.
cases there for that?
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions on that. Just let me get to it. So one of the things I asked was, because there's a comment made on page 246 that talks about an advantage of going with Philips, and I'll just get that on my, sorry, fucking up crazy here. Oh, there we go, right, page 246, no, I don't know if that's 246, the document, or 246, this bundle, because they don't line up. The document.
This one here.
Okay, so bottom paragraph, the Hauora has a number of significant existing service contracts with Philips. These are up for renewal in September, which is not too far away. There is potential to bulk the contracts together and reduce overall costs. My question was, well, in negotiating the servicing costs for this, was that argument made? Because we have to sign up to something which is 30,000 a year, is it, or 25,000 a year for servicing support systems. So I would have hoped this would have said, and we were cognizant of this upcoming bulk, so we've negotiated hard, as opposed to we'll sign up for this one and then maybe in September we'll leverage off this one by seeking a discount.
Does anyone have an answer to that?
Yes, I do. So I asked the same question, and the answer to that question is that we did look to go back to Philips and say, let's negotiate that fee down, because the fees are always negotiable. But the team believe that our biggest potential is to actually put everything together and we'll get more leverage about the lot, as opposed to just doing it one by one, like on this one. So
yeah, which is kind of weird.
But they're not, not going to they're reticent about putting a dollar amount to that at this point. But we're absolutely confident we'll be able to get a better price.
Okay, and the other question was, in decommissioning the existing machine that's going to come to the front, is there? So that's on page 248. What's the cost associated in timeframes for that? Because it's got associated costs. Not that's probably relevant to this paper, but I just thought about this. Obviously, has a cost in getting rid of the old machine, and could they have? Is it a Philips machine we've got at the moment, and can we wrap that in with taking a new Philips machine that they take the old one off us and decommission it at their cost or something? Right?
They may do, but it will be I mean, the machine has got no value on our books. And I don't know why it says decontamination, because I think it actually means decommissioning.
What, does it have radioactive material?
No.
That's really an operational matter.
Yeah, it was just a question that came up from the paper.
I think this is not applicable because there are no associated costs with that. I think that's out of the template. It's a standardised template, and so it says, what do you have to do? Yeah.
Okay, good point. Thank you.
Okay, so we are approving that that proposal for the replacement of that obsolete machine.
Yep.
Look, the next item is probably going to attract some discussion. So this is on the equity and health needs assessment. So before I hand over, I'm going to lay a couple of cards on the table from where my head is at with this. And I'm hoping that might cover off issues that other people have. So while I absolutely support this kind of work, what I'm really concerned with is to make sure that we don't end up with a report that can be interpreted by others as saying if they just made good lifestyle choices, or if the government just made sure all houses were insulated, all would be well and good. So I'm really keen to make sure that when we do this work, we also consider our role in health equity, and that we do things like consider our practice. So, you know, what are the equity issues in terms of wait times, in terms of treatment pathways, not just in terms of the end result. That we consider things like access. So has the locality that a patient resides in impacted on their ongoing access to public and community and primary health and ongoing relationship with the GP, which we know has got protective factors. So yeah, just really keen to make sure that when we do this work, we dig into not just high level outcomes, but also the practice of ourselves and how that practice can influence the outcomes for the patients that we're trying to influence. So that's kind of where I'm sitting with this. And I particularly make that comment because a lot of the material that we see is really that very high level outcome area, and just in too many situations you see that people use that to point the finger in the wrong direction, which I really want to make sure we don't end up in that space as a actually.
Great.
My thoughts on the paperwork, there was on the report was quite a lot made about the window dressing aspect of them and how sometimes these reports end up being used for the wrong purpose or ineffectual. And to talk about what Kimmy's just said, but then I read at page 258, third paragraph, where it says the EHNA will also provide a view of population health that can be used to guide development of services. I would have thought the whole purpose of it, according to the report, was that it should be used to guide development of service, and that's why you go through it. Otherwise, it is just a window dressing exercise. So my concern in the language there was that despite acknowledging that these reports are done and not used to the full effect, that we then haven't actually committed to using it to its full effect. And
so I think we're saying the same thing there, is that where we want this work to get us to is what does this mean for investment, particularly in terms of the equity flexibility that we're trying to progress.
So our hope with producing this report is that it then comes to you. You have the opportunity to review it, pull it apart, identify which areas you would like us to work on, and be participant in how we do that. So it's a document that provides you with the clearest objective view of what the information is that exists.
Okay.
And we then work with the board to say, so how would you like this to be prioritised?
So in commissioning this work, I guess the signal that I'm giving is, yes, those high level outcomes, they're important, but also the touch points along the way to getting them are important to me. So they inform things like our own decision making around practice. And for example, I've seen one that was done, I think, by either Counties Manukau or Waitemata in their cardiology department, and it looked very specifically not just at cardiology outcomes between different ethnic groups, but also wait times, referral times, sure. that nature of the treatment, whether or not people were being referred into one treatment path that might require less follow-up, because the presumption was that because they were Maori, they were more likely to be and did not attend a follow-up appointment. So that the end result we get from doing this work is knowing where we need to change our own decision-making and practice, and knowing where it is going to be best for us to invest. What I don't want to end up is another population profile that tells us largely what we already know.
I've got two more questions. So on 258 again, it says, second class bullet point on that page, recommendations, approve moving forward with a wider EHNA for completion by October 2020. So is that saying that the EHNA will be completed by October 2020? As a,
for us, for our
so that's what the overview of what the whole mahi will look like will be completed by then. Or
No, your information that you need as a board to then direct us around your priorities.
Okay.
It to a certain degree, Cam, I think what you're talking about speaks to what then happens below the line. So we may say cardiology issue here. We may not tell you that here are the reasons for this issue, but you may say to us, we want to understand that issue better.
Yeah, if you can tell me the reasons for that issue. It's in October.
I don't think we're going to be able to do that.
No.
The person who's leading this work is our Oz Mansell, who is the MOH for the public health team, and it's part of the work that he oversees. And we wouldn't necessarily be digging into one area until we could actually see these are the areas that we actually need to focus on, and you then direct us as to which areas to do that.
It seems to me that we will be better positioned to direct what areas to focus on, and particularly what areas to invest in, and which we're going to be wanting to be working up and doing by the end of the calendar year, if we've got that more detailed information.
Yeah. I suppose this piece of work here is at a sort of a higher level than down at the level of cardiology. You've just had Jerry's presentation.
That was just an example.
As an example,
yeah.
but we've got the same examples in many other services as well that we currently provide. So, and we've got focuses on cancer, cardiology, child health, all of those sorts of areas within, because we think those are the areas that we should be focusing on. Particularly around equity improvement. This will provide us with the confirmation that we are focusing on the right areas, and also provide us with a degree of information around about that we are being successful, so we are seeing changes. So that will have two benefits for that. One is we'll show what we're doing currently is on the right track, and those areas where we're not, so we can concentrate on where we're not to make sure we get on. And also we can see where we've been successful, we're improving, where we're turning, where we're turning the tide in some areas, is what are we doing there? And therefore, is that applicable elsewhere where we're not, and we're not moving fast enough? So, we're hoping a lot's going to come out of this.
So is the report
I'm sure you are
that we're
too.
going to end up with, does it replicate the previous report from 2009, 2013, something like that, in order for us to know how far we've come?
Partially.
And in order for us to decide, we want to change direction.
It will give you a baseline on where we've been and where we are today. And the reason the Māori health profile was provided is that there is some information that we would probably pull from that to say, here's the difference. There is no difference.
So I guess at the risk of sounding non-New Zealanderish, how specific will this get into Māori areas? And I'll couch that by saying this. Every single dashboard, every single line on the graph is always showing that. So will this, I guess I'm asking, can this be specifically about Māori?
It is built around the premise.
And couching that again with Māori being the largest population in Tairāwhiti. So we've got a population which is the largest in Tairāwhiti on its own, who are at risk, because all our graphs say that. So this H&A to me has got to be about where Māori are sitting.
Yeah.
If you would like us to rename and entirely focus and call it the Māori Equity Health Needs Assessment, happy to do that.
But that's what it's going to be.
Yes, it's not.
Good, I think it's good. It's putting a peg in the ground, it's being intentional, it's being specific, and it follows the line of our trajectory, particularly with our plans going forward. Not just, it's a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but at the end of the day, our job is to cater for that, to close that. Those lines have got to close. And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute, the non-Māori line is the place to be. All I'm suggesting is work has got to be done to get it.
Sure. And I think that if I could just draw your attention again to the graph on page 265 it's that ethnicity graph once again. We've got two populations here in Tairāwhiti. We've got the Māori population and the non-Māori population, and they're completely different in terms of profile. So we have to be very careful that the way in which we are planning for and delivering and understanding services within our district accounts for the fact of that completely two different populations that we've got here, and that we're not designing services, not wanting to hark back to the line that we're going to remove out of the plan, around one population that missed the mark for the other.
Yes.
And also from the fact that that we need to have them in a way that actually gets the outcomes that everybody in the population wants, needs, and deserves, and should have. And so we need to be analysing and understanding how that is working and how we're going to make sure those change. The other thing about that is, we've got that really young population for Māori, and we want to make sure healthiest kids in the world, that they move on up, and whole different thing going on there. One generation change.
Sandra.
I do just wonder, coming back to what you were saying, Kim, about right at the very beginning, it's not about taking anything away. It's about adding to and improving. Is it possible at all, in the terms of the title of this piece of work, that we capture that somehow? Because suddenly it's actually building on. It's not about. And I know it's semantics, I understand that, but
except that if the data shows that there's been no improvement, why should we hold on to something that isn't?
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. There has to be a building on, not a it's grow, not stay the same or take away.
So using Kim's example and dropping down to the level where we would unpick what the reasons were for the disparities still to be wide, it may mean that we would stop some of the services that are not delivering. So the guarantee is not that you'll add on to, but the guarantee is you'll improve the service for the population that needs it more. Well, that's what we would
to my mind, you can achieve equity in a whole number of ways. And so one way is about designing new services that meet a particular population need. One way is about making services more responsive, and one way is about actually holding the mirror up to yourselves and saying, this is what we're doing and it's not working. And that might well be around whether or not we're giving people equitable treatment pathways, and whether or not we are referring people at, whether or not Māori are getting referrals in the same time frame as non-Māori, and sometimes holding the mirror up and addressing our own practice is actually more effective than throwing a whole lot of money into something, because it's a way to actually just say, actually, this is an underserved part of our population, and all we need to do is shine the spotlight on them and give them the kind of clinical care that, their colleagues over the road are getting, and start to see some results. So to my mind, equity is about achieving equity is not just about additional investment. It's not about taking things away from people, but it is about, one of the bits in this equation has to be about holding the mirror up to our own practice.
Because if you don't do that exercise, then you don't actually know whether that's the impediment. You've got to do that exercise.
Sure, and I think the other thing we always need to remember that, having people within our population who are not getting good outcomes actually doesn't benefit anybody. It doesn't. It just doesn't. It doesn't make. So if you really want to get down to the base and what's in it for me, if I want to say what's in it for me, if people get better health outcomes in this population, I will be more assured of getting the care and the services I need for me and my family. because the resources will be available and we'll be able to. So if I need to get down to the what's in it for me point of view, that's absolutely what's in it for me. If I'm not even thinking about my fellow human beings and what's the right thing to do, if I think just what's going to get better services for me today, tomorrow, and the day after, yeah, it would be get it right for everybody, because then it'll be right for me. And yeah, so if you want to get down to that, you know, that level, that's, yeah, so that can be the message for some people who want that message. Fine, but for others, it'll be around, you know, yeah, it's the right thing to do is to improve health outcomes for everybody in our community, and that will bring, yeah, and that's so that brings a benefit for everybody.
Yeah,
Is the timing right? Will there be enough time if you say it's going to be done by the end of October? Will that allow enough time for the board to then say, for the next year, you know, we've got time to make changes?
So between October and February, the timing that we'd be putting against planning for the following year.
But this will also be informing our equity investments for the current financial year as well.
Yes, as well. And not as much as the year after, I don't think.
Yeah, hopefully we will have some of the, well, we've got the, but not with this information.
Yes, political answer.
So we started tinkering perhaps, but this will back the decision.
You know, we did talk about that. One of the things we wanted to have was for the board to have a workshop around, you know, direction. You're a new board, you have a majority of new members, you know, and we just haven't had the opportunity to do that since December last year when you all took up office. And, you know, maybe, and not maybe, I think this is a really, you know, once we've got this, it is a really good base point to have that conversation, you know, November-wise, so that, you know, we and a dedicated time to do that, invite partners in to be part of that, I would suggest, and then that will be informing around conversations that we're having with other providers and people around what we might invest in this year, and then of course even more important the following year.
Which highlights, I love that partnership, Kōrero, because we need non-Māori to understand this equity issue in the speaks and the conversations they have, to not see Māori as being, we have these terms around being specialist treatment for and be in a negative connotation, that the health equity issue has been noted some time, but we just need the conversation to be in our community that we are working to make this better for all, but there's a focused attention needed, because we keep seeing these statistics. And I just want us to be really cognizant as partners in this room even around what equity and health for Māori, what it feels like, because we've got our own stories, but we've also got the stories of those who come to us. And they may not complain, but, you know, it's a conscious effort of all of us, Māori, non-Māori, to say we are wanting to make the healthiest children in the land live here. And so we break that poverty cycle, because we know we've got children who just think that's all there is, this is it.
Well, I think at its basis level, it can just come to need, you know. All you have to do is look at those high level outcomes, and it's very clear that there is an underserved part of our population that needs the light shining on it.
It would be really interesting, sort of picking up on Jim's kōrero about, if I look from my, you know, male Pākehā self-centred perspective, actually, if you didn't spend a health dollar fixing up the equity issues, that dollar is put back into the general pool for everybody. And I've never seen anywhere we've actually done the exercise of calculating what that actually would amount to. I mean, if the Māori level was at, and I would say the average non-Māori level, what would that actually mean in resourcing? Because people aren't attending 3.5 times dying of earlier, 15 times more appointments, blah, blah, blah. You know, actually, if you quantify that, how much more additional spend would there be for the non-Māori population? That's a really interesting one to appease.
12 million.
Yeah, so I imagine work has been done on that kind of health economics. I don't know that it would have been done at our regional level, but certainly people like Burl or PwC would have done that kind of health economics. Look, in terms of this issue, I think we've probably chewed it around a bit, given some signals. Probably my aspirations for I want this to land maybe a little bit above where it might realistically land. But, you know, so signaling my thoughts here, and I think others have signalled there. So I think at this point we say, mahi atu mahi. We'll look forward to seeing it and providing the next set of, you know, where we go with it. We've got an item 8.4, board photo approval, and I'm not entirely sure what this is.
Yeah, what? I saw that.
There's no boost on there. Okay, Rachel did just look. We probably,
We need a
I can't
photo on the
see.
wall. And this is the last photo that was taken of you all.
Yeah, let's go that one.
That's
Let's go that one.
This remember, it's going to be up there for a long time.
Oh, you're really close.
No, we need to.
I didn't have my face on.
So perhaps we can all put our pretty clothes on for the next meeting.
Yes, Tony. Yeah.
I was looking for your pretty clothes.
Yeah.
Can we just Photoshop clothes?
Just Photoshop.
Oh,
Yeah, can we Photoshop some of these at the same time?
Yeah. Photoshop a little bit of slimming.
Community.
Put a Snapchat filter on us. You'll be fine.
Get rid of the rosier.
Okay, everybody. So at this point, I'm going to say thank you very much to any members of the public who are still joining us, and to our reporter. And I'm going to put the resolution that we move to exclude the public as provided at page 2, pursuant to Schedule 3 of the New Zealand Public Health and Disability Act, with the reasons outlined in the board papers.